Hello, you guys. How are you all? We are waiting on Jen and Crime Curious and maybe 22 Tantrum, so I'm going to just chat with you guys for a few minutes before we get started. Hey, Forever Chasing the Sun. Hey, Roses Are Red. Hey, Carol Claus. Hey, Trista. Hey, Jen. Hey, Christy, thank you. Oh, girl, I love some tie-dye. I have an Instagram that gets dropped that has all the tie-dye I've made because I do sell it, but I just haven't been doing it as much lately. So check that out if you're interested. I've got a lot of really cool stuff over there. Hey, Joyce. Hey, Corinne. Hey, Deb. Hey, Maria. Hey, Christina. How are you guys? Hey, B Crumbs. Hey, Laura. Hey, Pointer Lover. Hey, Riddler. Hey, Corey. Thank you guys for being here. Hey, Jane Doe. Missy's Angels. Hey, Teresa. Quilting Addict. Hey, Christy. Oh, you missed everything today. Oh my gosh, we have a lot to talk about. So we were just over on Crime Curious, just kind of venting and talking about the day. 22 Tantrums came up on panel. She actually went in person today and she was kind of talking about what she saw. But over here, we're going to go through, like, I wrote down notes. We've got several pages of notes. We're going to go through start to finish everything they talked about and, give our opinions along the way because there's a lot of moments that I feel like we need to talk about. So, hey, Rat Mom. Hey, Crafty Chris. Welcome. Oh, look, Jen's already here. Hey, Jen.
Hi, babe.
I was just telling them that we were just on Crime Curious kind of venting about the day and stuff. After watching it on your channel. And then over here, we're going to go through from start to finish because I took detailed notes, the whole thing. So I
Oh
want
my
to get.
God, I love your thumbnail.
Oh, you do? Yay. Thank
Yes, I love
you.
it.
The fire in the gel.
Yes, you did so good. I love it.
Thank you. I was so busy today. I know nothing. Oh, you guys.
If
Yeah.
ever there was a day not to, well, let's listen. You could, okay. Today was something else, but tomorrow is going to be even better
Mm.
in the worst way possible.
Yeah. Before we go into like everything that happened, let me show you some things I grabbed from Twitter.
Yes.
Oh, and
You're so good at getting stuff on Twitter. I have a Twitter and I don't even check it. I never look at it unless you send me something and then I'd be clicking. And then I forget how much I like Twitter until the next time.
yeah, there's so much you can find there at 22 Tantrums. If you wanted to come up, you can. I did email you the link, and then yeah, and we're gonna go through like start to finish the whole thing. But I found a few things on Twitter I want to show you guys. Did you hear Jen about her talking about kissing Ted Bundy?
Okay. So that happened. This is how I heard about it. I heard about it in my chat, but I was so busy being angry about how this morning went that by the time I caught it, I couldn't scroll up anymore to see the original comment. So just basically no.
Hey, Kimberly. Auntie. All right. Well, I'll read you in her words, Dorothy Lewis's words. She says,
Okay.
she's talking about going to see Ted before he was executed. And she says, before I walked out of the room, he bent down and kissed me on the cheek. And so I kissed him on the cheek and walked out. And when I got home, I was trying to make light of it. There's nothing like really. And there's nothing like really. So I walked in the kitchen and my husband and my daughter were there. And I said, you are looking at the last woman to kiss Ted Bundy. So that's all it is. They kissed on the cheek, but a lot of people are talking about it right now.
I don't know that I would reciprocate a kiss on the cheek knowing what Ted Bundy did.
Yeah.
I just
Oh,
don't think
look.
I could do it.
Hey, you guys. Welcome. I'm so happy that you guys are here. I don't think I could do it either. Did you guys hear about her kiss with Ted Bundy?
I heard about it from you today, Alex.
Okay. So
I was waiting for her to say it in court.
oh, so you guys, yeah, I told you at the beginning, those of you coming in, we were on Crime Curious kind of venting about the day, and 22 Tantrums went today in person. And you're also a clinical psychologist or psychiatrist?
I'm not a drug dealer, so I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm a I'm a
Psychology.
licensed psychologist. I have a PhD in counseling psychology.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Oh, that's because that's even more interesting. Here's a few pictures of her today that were kind of clear. I grabbed from Twitter. Look at that one, you guys.
Y'all. I'm gonna change your face.
Oh my God, Allie, you have to send me that
Okay, look at her lawyer even.
because I'm going to do something with that.
Okay.
What's going on with his hair today? Yikes on bikes. Her other one's got his eyes closed.
The lawyer on the right is kind of cute in person. I feel like an idiot saying that, but he wasn't.
Dude, he looks cute in the pictures. I could totally see that. And okay, and there's just a couple more pictures from Twitter and some opinions I wanted to show you guys. But this is Al and the babies. I thought that was a good picture. And let me see.
Aw.
She a lot of people thought that, well, look at this. Here's a totally different opinion than what we've seen. Huge misstep today by the prosecution in the Letecia Stauch trial. Going hard after an elderly female expert witness made the prosecution out to be men who bully grandmas. Her testimony may not have even carried weight with these jurors, and the prosecution was way ahead already. And I saw a couple comments about that, and a couple comments who thought that that her testimony was very compelling. I didn't necessarily feel that way, but it's interesting to see like how opinions are all over. Pretty sure I just found Maria.
I did not get the impression that the prosecutor was a Mima bully. I just didn't. I did not. I thought that there were times when he pressed hard, but then he also like pulled back, and there were some jovial moments between the two of them. And I did not think he was a Mima bully. No, I did not. I'm sorry. I have to disagree just with that part alone. That's it. The rest of it, I mean, maybe I can say a little bit, but I don't know. He was not a Mima bully.
I didn't think so either, but I still like to see people who, who think so differently. All right, let me see here. Okay, so it started with Rhonda Niederhauser. To me, that didn't help them at all. Why did they call her, you guys?
I think they were asking themselves the same question.
Well, I think I know why they called her, but I can tell you it did not go the way they wanted to. Why they called her, I believe, is to show that Letecia did go and see a mental health professional, and this mental health professional missed diagnosing her with DID, or seeing that there was something bigger happening other than a generalized anxiety disorder. But their line of questioning was terrible, and so they never got there. But I think that's what their intent was, because otherwise, what would be the point? That's the only point that makes sense.
Right.
And at this point, to be honest, I don't even know if it actually makes sense, because I just sat through the most circular testimony I've ever witnessed, other than Letecia's tapes. And that's what I'm going to call them from now on, the Letecia tapes. I've never heard anything so circular in all my life. So I don't even know if I make sense at this point.
Thanks, Letecia.
Thanks, Letecia. I feel like I might be sanity challenged at this point.
Yeah, I think that maybe that's the point. No.
I'm questioning my own things right now.
And you guys jump in anytime you want. I'm just going to go through kind of, we started hearing about when Dorothy Lewis came up, her qualifications. She is extremely qualified. She studied at Harvard, at Yale, as some of the biggest names in the country. So that was kind of interesting. And then they get into this whole story with Diane Sawyer and all the things. But then, I know, I was like, in the process. Yeah, that happens a little. I don't know. Like, you kind of get that idea that she's like, I don't know, like a movie star or something, in moments. But anyways, then the prosecution tried to make a point that she wasn't licensed in Colorado and keep her from being qualified as a witness. I'm surprised that didn't work because they made a couple good points on that. They really did.
So, Alex.
Yeah.
On that part, I looked up the licensing thing, and I forget the wording right off the top of my head, but there is no reciprocity agreement for medical licenses with Colorado. So the prosecution had a great point with that. And as a licensed healthcare provider, you do not practice in a state you're not licensed in.
But is evaluating
Yes
the same as practicing? Okay.
You are performing the work that somebody can only do with your education and credentials. You are practicing. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a good thing to know.
Yeah, that is a good thing to know. And there is no how do you say that word?
Reciprocity.
Okay. Even when she said it today, I was like, okay, Alex, remember that. You got this. Like, you can do it. No, I did not remember it correctly. But okay, let's see. Then she gets into, altars. So she starts talking about altars keeping memories from their other altars. Dorothy says sometimes the other altars aren't aware of a murder even occurred. As far as they know it, they did not do it, she said. She said it's so unbelievable to clinicians, that's why she wants people there to see during her evaluations and stuff. And I wrote this in my notes. At this point, 22 Tantrums, you said in the chat, none of the jury is buying this. And I was like, 22 Tantrums says none of the jury is buying this at that point. Let's see. She watched other people's interviews. And so she starts talking about her household, living in a very violent household with Deborah. She did talk like she knew her family history, at least somewhat. So, and I'm sure she just looked over it, but she said that Letecia's mom would latch on to males who were extremely abusive to mom and Letecia. And she says that now this trigger warning, because this was a very weird part of today's testimony, but she talks about uncles, aunts, and grandparents giving Letecia enemas. She says that, this is a very important question when you're doing this kind of evaluation because it is a frequent way sodomy occurs. She said Letecia's grandfather gave her enemas on a daily basis. And she gave them to Gannon, and she perceived them as something he wanted her to do. She said this is not only sexually abusive, but physically abusive. I thought that was really interesting. What do you guys think about that?
I was disturbed. I don't think anybody
disturbed is the word.
Prepared for that.
Yeah. She does there. It just made me think because she's mentioned enemas. There's a constant running theme with him having a bloody butt and things like that. And I never had thought this would even be a possibility until C-Dub, I think, put it in your chat, Crime Curious, that remember she was wiping herself with tissues and stuff. Now, I don't think that she did do that, but I don't know, the possibility went from zero in my mind to at least open somewhat, but it's very odd. I just wasn't expecting that at all. And it's a very important question when you're doing this kind of evaluation. That surprised me.
Was it clear to either of you that Letecia admitted to Dr. Lewis that she did frequently give Gannon enemas?
She said her words were she gave them to Gannon and she perceived this as something he wanted her to do.
Oh, dear God.
Yeah.
So then all these stories we hear about his struggles with incontinence and her feeding him Metamucil and she's giving him enemas, like Munchausen's by proxy?
I know. That's what I was thinking. I'm like, wait, so you're doing Miralax and enemas and all these things at once when we had those phone calls. Hey, Mystic.
Oh, this makes me
roses are red. An enema is something that you use, like if someone's not able to use the bathroom, it has like a liquid in it, and you put it in their bum and like it cleans you out, basically. Giving him enemas and Miralax, then getting mad if he had an accident. Oh my God.
Yeah, but if the reason that she was giving him those was because of constipation, right? Which
Mhm.
Al did say that he did have, so that part I believe, because I don't think Al would lie about that. That can be incredibly dangerous because you can perforate the bowel that way.
Oh my God.
He might have been constipated because bitch kept fucking with his intestines.
Yep.
I gotta say, you guys, I know. I don't think I just don't think it's true. I think I just think it's a lie. For some reason, I can't tell you why, but I do. I don't think she did that.
I
Well,
hope you're
Grammy
right.
Nini,
I so hope you're right.
and that's what Grammy Nini said too. I'm praying she was lying. So I hope so. I really do. Okay, then she gets into her household. She says her household was a madhouse. Mom brings in man after man. And he was asking, is it conducive to, a household? Is it something you would expect in someone that has DID? And then they get into James, the stepfather, and that she could not refer to him by James. That
Yeah, she should call him by his government name.
she said that she had such disgust for him that she would call him Jackass James, that she could, and the way that Dorothy is describing this, she believes her. I truly believe she believes her. I don't think that she's just lying. I think Letecia has fooled her because she's like, Letecia was so disgusted. She could not even get his name out. Jackass James is the only way that she could say his name. She said it with great disgust as well. That was a
Can
quote.
I butt in here
Of course.
just for a quick second of this is how my psychologist brain thinks sometimes. If, God forbid, you had the misfortune of experiencing something like Leticia's claiming she experienced as a child, I feel like calling the perpetrator a jackass is a little bit too playful.
Ooh. I was
That
so
name doesn't strike me as consistent with what you would call someone who perpetrated those kinds of things on you as an innocent child.
It'd be more like Bastard James or something like really, right? Like really nasty, or would it be nothing?
The stepfather who will remain nameless, the devil.
Okay.
Yeah, I
The
feel like she
sicko?
wouldn't actually use his name. I
Yeah.
feel like she would call him, my stepfather, my abusive stepfather, something like that. I don't know, though. People are different. There is something that doesn't quite ring true about a lot of things that Letecia says. So why should this thing be any different? I mean, there is evidence that he was abusive on some level. I mean, for Pete's sake, he made her younger brother drink beer at like 3 years old until he passed out. So that's obviously, that's a definite no-no in the parenting manual. So he wasn't, he's not going to get any kind of awards or anything.
Yeah,
Wow.
Kimberly H's comment. She couldn't
Yeah.
even use her abuser's name. When Dr. Lewis was talking about that, I did do a little bit of yoga to try to get a glance at how Letecia was responding to that because, if she's dissociating, right? She's, allegedly developed this DID because the abuse was so bad. Then you would expect, as Dr. Lewis is talking about this horrific trauma, that Letecia would show some sort of reaction, right? And
Right.
she didn't move.
Oh
She
my
wasn't
gosh.
moving at all.
Wow. Yeah, if it's so she can't even say his name, you would think there would be some sort of reaction. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you come up here for this because I love to get your insight, and Jen's too, of course. I don't know where Crime Curious went. Something's going on with her stuff. But then they go on to talk about Letecia running and hiding in the woods and stuff like that. Now, this part comes later, but I'm going to go ahead and talk about it now since we're on the Jackass James part. She used her stepfather as her excuse that night. When she messages in the middle of the night to say, I'm not coming to work, my stepfather was hit by a car. They are using that to say that she was basically having flashbacks. Now, that to me almost made me think like, wow, that's kind of crazy. I don't know. It almost made it seem a little bit possible, bringing it all the way back to, that story that she gave. Would that, I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
So I think I mentioned this on Crime Curious's channel. Before I was a civilian in private practice, I was active duty Army psychologist. And I also used to work on Fort Carson as a civilian. So I'm very much familiar with trauma associated flashbacks. And what they look like when they happen is so different than what the general public thinks they look like, and quite different than how they're portrayed on a lot of television shows too. So that, I guess, suffice it to say, the idea that she somehow had this flashback that she was reliving her stepfather's death, however, a decade plus later, that doesn't ring true with me at all. It sounds like a convenient excuse.
Interesting. I think that I love hearing from, like, to see if this is something consistent with other people who have went through these same kinds of things, because a person who hadn't, like, I'm worried, what if the jury hears that and they're like, oh, that makes sense. She did use her stepfather as an excuse that night. Maybe she was in some sort of delusion or whatever. Okay. Then they get on to the Russian, speaking Maria, and Jen made a good point, and I think I need to point this out. So she's talking about, this part of her personality, Maria. And she actually says, at this time, I thought, have I just met the aspect of her personality that killed Gannon? Which was a pretty powerful statement, I thought. But she said that Maria spoke Russian, but then she said she couldn't understand it. It just sounded Russian. And in that moment, the way she said that, I thought it was so transparent that she was fooled by Letecia. But I would think that somebody that has done this for as long as she has would not be so easily fooled. No, it's not a Russian name. What do you guys think? Anything, or you want me to keep going? Let's see.
Well, I think my thought is this, real quick. If some of her testimony is sort of disconnected. I've been thinking about this while you were reading stuff and kind of going over some things, and it almost seems like she's reporting what she saw, right? But I didn't get the impression one way or another, which I thought was interesting, that you felt that Dr. Lewis believed her. I kind of didn't get the impression one way or the other whether she believed her or not. Sort of like, I'm just reporting the news. I didn't make it. You know what I mean? Like that.
Oh,
excuse me. Sorry, I didn't mean to burp.
That's interesting. Maria says it's actually a very popular name in Russia. Maria, I noticed your comment today that you were one who thought it was compelling testimony, which that's interesting because, like I said, there are people who did. Very cool. All right. Let me see here.
So I made a note up in court before I had to hide my phone. She said something about near the beginning of her testimony, you can't diagnose something that you're not looking for and that you don't believe in. And my thought was, but then once you believe in it and you're looking for it, you see it everywhere, right? And I thought that was notable. And the difference between psychiatrists and psychologists, when I got on Crime Curious's channel, I was like, no, I'm a psychologist, not a drug dealer.
Right.
And psychiatrists, obviously, most of you probably know this, but I'll say it again if that's okay. They are medical doctors with an MD or DO degree, and so they go through medical school, and then they specialize after they graduate in psychiatry. So like the neurobiological bases of human behavior. So chemical imbalances and parts of the brain that might be involved in different types of mental health disorders. They write prescriptions and they help medicate people, and they don't do a lot of talk therapy these days. Psychologists, on the other hand, we're not medical doctors. We get our PhDs or PsyDs in psychology or some type of specialized clinical counseling, forensic psychology, and we look at more of how human behavior develops and the psychosocial, psychological, and social factors, including environment, that might contribute to a person's mental illness. So I'm probably biased here, but we have more of a whole person perspective because we don't not consider potential medical and neurological bases. We don't tell people not to take medications or anything like that. But we take things more in a context. And it was interesting how Dr. Lewis always wants these brain scans. And she was saying how that's such a hard science. And like the reality is that but the biological basis for behavior and mental illness is still very much theory. we're still learning new things and coming up with new hypotheses about what does or doesn't contribute to a mental health issue. And a brain scan is not definitive for that. So that's just my 2 cents. I can say more about that later if it's relevant, but I just want to throw that out.
Oh, that is so interesting. I was thinking that. I'm like, how much is this really going to show? I mean, it's not going to, I don't know, how important would it be? Because you're not going to see on an EEG, like, but her switching, or you know what I mean? I guess, would you be able to even see if someone's like disassociating? Would that show on a scan like that? Or
honestly,
So-
I haven't done enough. I haven't checked the literature lately. I think the best they could get is correlation, but they couldn't necessarily say causation. And, speaking of correlation, the prevalence rate, I think I said this in your chat earlier, Alex, that the prevalence rate of DID in the population is so low, like maybe 1%. And the fact that Dr. Lewis seems to have diagnosed DID in every single serial killer she's met, like that's the prevalence, apparently. Like that's
Yeah.
it seems like a statistical improbability to me.
Oh, interesting. What are you going to say, Jen, before I go on to the next part?
Oh, I forgot. Go ahead. Keep
Sorry.
going. No, you're fine. I'm distracted by something else just momentarily, but
Thank you, Lisa Lulu. The defense duped the doctor. We're going to talk about that for sure in a minute. My niece fooled her doctor for a long time and got disability out of it. She was fine any other time out of the doctors. Okay, well, when you remember, let me know. So the next
I
thing-
remember.
Okay.
Okay. There have been some studies, right, that suggest that on an EEG that they can see an alter that the EEGs are different. It's the same person, obviously the same brain, but allegedly one person is one personality and then the other EEG is a different personality. However, I find it interesting. I'm not so sure if it's true or not, because I think sometimes we see what we want to see. But I do think, I will say this for Dr. Lewis, her research and her case studies, that part of her testimony was compelling. It was. I think that she has some really interesting and fascinating, really, ideas and theories. And I would like to hear more about them, but not when she's supposed to be testifying about Letecia. Like, I wanted to hear more about her interactions with Letecia.
Yeah,
How,
me too.
how did she greet her? Because that was another thing. That was a difference. Dr. Torres recalled specifically Letecia addressing her, and well, I think they played it too. And Letecia saying, "Well, I'm sorry that I didn't, you spoke to me, but I didn't speak to you, and that's because you were wearing red and black, and that is a trigger for me." Blah blah, her whole spiel or whatever. But I just thought that Dr. Torres was able to, and maybe it might have been helpful. Why didn't the defense do what the prosecution did? Because Dr. Torres was really aided by the video. So why didn't the defense play the video for the witness, and then she could reflect? It's like they got her up there to talk about an evaluation that was a while ago, for Pete's sake,
And a lot of them couldn't remember, actually. So you know what I mean? They couldn't remember exact detail. Like, they could kind of remember, but they weren't sure, and they didn't want it. They wanted to see their notes or their report before they expounded.
Before they answered. Yeah, which is like what you should be doing. If you're not sure and they'll let you look at your notes. Pro tip, look at your fucking notes. I would.
Yeah. Well, okay. about that brain injury before I lose this. What about in football players? Because Gigi put in the chat, and I remember with the Aaron Hernandez case, there actually is a correlation with like brain injury and violence,
CTE.
right?
Yeah, CTE. The I forget what it stands for. But yes. But it's repeated brain injuries. It's not one
Like-
here and one there.
Right. And they said that she had a car crash and they can't talk about the softball, whatever, but a bookshelf fell on her at school and apparently she lost consciousness.
As an adult.
Yes.
That's the thing. And she was working. Now, Letecia will go to a doctor to get a note to get out of a contract. You don't think that she would go to a doctor to get some workers' comp? Come on. I'm just saying.
She said
you're exactly right, Jen.
I think she would too. I really do. She said that Letecia, this is a direct quote. She was or is quite an amazing young woman in this way. She's not stupid. She gave the most peculiar descriptions of what might have happened, things that were not even believable. This is part of why she believes that she was insane at the time, because her theory is that she's not stupid. She's a smart, amazing girl. But her, the fact that she said even somebody she's not stupid, but makes up stories no one would even expect to believe. I don't think she knows what happened. That is a quote from her. She does not think that she knows what happened. That is frustrating.
So my question to that is, since it's an affirmative defense, how does she plead not guilty by reason of insanity if she can't even acknowledge what happened? I had a question about that when I was sitting in court today.
Yeah, if she has no independent memory, because this alter Maria, allegedly, or who knows, maybe it's not Maria. Maybe we're all wrong and we've all been assuming that it's Maria. And when Letecia takes the stand, she's going to bust out a whole new alter. None of us, she's going to be like split and talk about the beast. Watch. Anyway, but she has no independent. And how did she put it together with her? But the thing is that's not how she put it. She says that she put it together with her attorneys, but it's still not an independent memory. If you have to have somebody help you along, then it's not an independent memory. That'd be like Allie telling me how prom dress shopping went yesterday. Allie was not there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
She could confabulate it for you.
Can you, Allie, get to confabulating?
Y'all are funny. Well, I've got to hear your thoughts on this one, you guys, both of you, because this one was even more. They're talking about psychosis. And, she says basically psychosis is, when someone has a belief that most people do not. That's how she described it, which I thought was an odd way to describe psychosis. But she says she said this was the most convincing thing to me, that she is insane. She says she not only was talking to people who aren't there. She was also talking to God. She said, but a lot of us talk to God, so I can't really use that. But most convincing part, she didn't even tell me. It's from the guard's notes from jail. Several times, different caretakers saw her talking to people who weren't there. She didn't know she was even being watched. She said, and it is very common for people to hear their alternates talking to each other.
How can she know what Letecia knew or didn't know at the time? Didn't Letecia spend a good portion of her first arrival there, which is when the guards would be most taking the notes and watching her most closely, in the turtle shell? They would be observing her. So I would need to know, in order for me to believe that part of it, or what I should say is, Dr. Lewis, Dorothy is not my friend, Jen. You got to quit calling her by her first name. You don't know this lady. Dr. Lewis, Dr. Lewis, I need to know the dates of those and the circumstances, because that plays hugely into it.
Well,
How do you know she doesn't know what?
uncommon.
How would she know what Letecia knows or doesn't know? I mean, first of all, you have to rely on Letecia to tell you, right? Well, Leticia's a liar, so there's your problem. There's the first problem.
Did you guys catch that she was saying like you can't just rely on the person to give you an accurate background? But then she said she also didn't get collateral information. She read
Yes,
other
I did.
reports, but
I
all of
did.
that information in the other reports is from Letecia.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I know. And didn't they
What
point
I
out
thought
that
it was interesting is that she couldn't with the collateral, sorry, Allie, with the collateral information. I don't understand why she didn't put her foot down more about interviewing the people that were closest to Letecia, and without reading what they wrote in a report. I think there's something to be said for meeting face to face, and there's people give all kinds of subtle tells, and you don't have to necessarily know somebody for an extended period of time to you get a vibe from people. Is that science? I don't know, probably not. But if you're trained in this, it's one thing for me to sit here and sit across from somebody and say that bitch is lying, okay, and I only met her 5 minutes ago. But it's different when somebody who's trained in evaluating people, because you have to listen to what the patient says, right? But you also have to take it as a whole, right? And that's her job. So wouldn't it be better to get that? I don't understand why she didn't put her foot down about that more, or raise
I
a
don't,
fuss. I would
I don't
have. I've raised a fuss for far less.
Well, she
So
pointed it out in her book that people often fake those things, and that's why you need these scans and the other source of information. So,
yes. I don't think a
Childhood
scan is
archive.
going to tell her that she has DID or not. A scan would tell her that if she had a brain injury, which is part of her theory that they all sort of go together, it's part of the elements required for the recipe that is DID. But still, I don't know.
what were you going to say, 22? And then I want to tell you guys one of her moments where she describes Letecia having psychosis, or an episodic psychosis, she says.
Oh, I have a lot to say, but I don't need to say it
No.
right now.
Okay. Well, anytime, because I love hearing from both of you guys.
No, we want to hear you say it. I'm tired of hearing. I've said so much today. I feel like I need to just STF you for a while.
No, you don't.
I'll share this anecdote. They were talking about I don't remember if it was Dr. Lewis's testimony or whose testimony it was, but they were talking about like when you see psychosis or when you see serious mental illness, you know it. And I can remember two off the top of my head in my career when I saw something that was well outside normal limits. And one of the times I know I already mentioned that I used to be active duty military. I was in Afghanistan. And it was one of those moments where, holy shit, what this person is telling me is 100% true to them. And I know it to be 100% like not real. And it's a there's no mistaking it for something it's not. Now, granted, there's a lot of uncertainty with diagnoses, and I always say it's more of an art than a science. But when you're talking about those diagnoses that land at the very far end of the spectrum, we're talking like very low incidence rates. You know it when you see it, and you don't have to be that seasoned as a mental health professional to know it when you see it. You just know in your brain, this doesn't mesh with anything I've done before, with anyone I've worked with before. Because our brains kind of automatically go to like, okay, which chapter of the DSM am I feeling from this person? Unfortunately, I think that Dr. Lewis, bless her heart, I'm sure she's a brilliant clinician. I mean, look at her CV. You don't testify in front of Congress when you're an idiot. It's just that her explanation for this criminal behavior is DID. And that's like saying that it's a miracle that anybody that experiences trauma ends up growing up without DID. And as a psychologist, I just don't believe that. I think there's a perfect storm that has to happen, and a whole lot of lack of this and that and the third for a young person who ends up being victimized to later go on and develop that as their only compensatory response. And I think I mentioned this in Jen's chat while I was there today, that if her family was that god awful they're not the kind of people that get on an airplane and fly across the country and rent cars for you when you're going through a crisis.
Yes.
If there was that little support and concern for one another's well-being and her family of origin, they wouldn't have been in Colorado within days of Gannon going missing.
Oh my God, that's an excellent point. I did not think of that, and I didn't see your comment because sometimes, I'm listening and not watching chat. But yeah, if they're so awful, why did they come out to Colorado, help you rent a car, all of that if they're so horrible? Which I will say, her family and actually just the general area they're from, they do have a reputation for being rough. You know what I mean? Rough around the edges. That's just the kind of area they're from. But that is an excellent point about them coming out there to help her.
That really is a fantastic point.
It is, yeah.
I'm a real doctor.
Because, when
I can send you transcripts, Alex.
No,
when you think about it, I mean, it makes so much logical sense, though, when you think about it, right? The worst time of your life, your stepson is missing, right? Because that's the story that they heard, right? I don't call the people that I would have the people that are going to actually help me, not the people that are going to add more stress to an already jacked up situation. Like, I know there are some members of my family that you do not call in a crisis, because then the crisis it'll be about them and not helping you.
Yeah.
So I avoid that kind of stuff.
Yes. Bree has a comment. I actually don't recall this, but let me see if you guys do. She says, well, and to that point, remember that page Letecia had where she wrote, my mom is the greatest mom in the world and her name is so-and-so. Why would she have wrote that if she had a terrible mom? But I don't remember seeing where she wrote that, but I know that there's so much that's come out. I'm not surprised that I missed something. You can't. There's no way you can go without missing something along the way. But do you guys know where she wrote that?
No.
I have no idea.
Okay. All right.
No, and I will say that.
No.
Who?
Nicole Mobley. If we could get her.
Oh my God.
That'd be amazing.
Letecia's sister disowned Harley for not believing Letecia. That's right. She did say that she quit getting help. Oh, it was on
Is Aunt
Facebook.
Brenda Leticia's sister or Leticia's aunt?
Her aunt.
Her aunt. Okay.
Yeah. And now her sisters are confusing. I know she has a sister that's Julie. Her name is Juju on Facebook. And then Amy is another one. I don't know. I will say, Christine G was like trying to explain to me the family, and it's a little bit confusing. And I don't know if she's been honest about it all, because if you dig and try to line up like a family tree, it doesn't really make sense unless James is her real. I need Christine to explain it. Maybe I can get her to do that soon, because I'm Amy Lowry. Yeah. Because it doesn't actually all make sense with how she's explained it. Imagine that with Letecia. Okay, so here is one of Dr. Lewis's points about, her having episodic psychosis. They start to talk about the fire, and she says, about Gannon starting the fire. Dorothy says, I was a bit confused. I'm like, yeah, we were too, lady. But she said, I think the candle was on the floor, and it got knocked over and started this fire. And after this, visions of James being alive started happening with her, like we talked about. She said her and Gannon, then she has a story of her and Gannon driving and seeing James on the side of the road. She sees a big figure on the side of the road, and that's James. And then she says she also saw an entity with a cape. These are hallucinations, beyond reality, psychotic symptoms. She said, just like her text to work, that is one of her least believable concoctions. This is her word for word. She said, it would be stupid to give that explanation. She is not a stupid girl. She said, basically, and they said she might have borderline, which that would, episodic psychosis is, I guess, a symptom of that, or you could tell me more, 22, but that was one of her points to why she believes that she has the ID.
Yeah, the takeaway from that part of the testimony, what I gathered was basically like, this lie is so extravagant that a sane person wouldn't expect to get away with it. So it must be psychotic. And boy, let me tell you some of this shit. Can I swear here?
Yes.
Well, you just did. So too late now, sister.
Some of the shit that I've heard, and it's like, okay, like I have a test I can give you to find out if you're being honest. But that's an unsophisticated response. I would expect that from like maybe somebody during their internship, but
Oh, wow.
no.
Yeah, because it doesn't make sense. Look, I that's what I took away from it, is that she's out here, that the lie is so out there that, but if she had done her homework, what she would realize is that a lot of that people don't question Letecia because it's a pain in the ass to even go at her, and sometimes people pick their battles with her. And so a lot of times when they know, when, like, even with Al, he allowed her to, after the fact, after she stole $8,000 from him and lied about it, he still was like, okay, about, with her. Do you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
it wasn't worth it. It was not worth getting. And she held onto that lie to the very end. That's not psychosis. That's a liar.
Yeah.
who she's an emotional terrorist, in my opinion. And
Yeah,
I know that's not like an
borderline.
actual diagnosis, but that's what she reminds me of, is an emotional terrorist. And she stomps her feet and makes it miserable for everybody until she gets her way. I don't deal with people like that. That's probably why I'm so repulsed by her.
It's 100% like, and it's like one of my, I don't remember which one of my supervisors it was, but when I was first starting out, they always told us, like, you'll know when somebody has a personality disorder because you'll notice yourself reacting to them. And it's super true. Like, I'm sure if you guys all reflect on people you know in your lives, if there's just people that, like, maybe they don't necessarily rub you the wrong way, but like you have a feeling, whether you have to kind of change your approach with them, or you're tiptoeing around them, or walking on eggshells, or you're extra guarded, like that's usually a pretty good indicator that there's some personality stuff going on. Whether it meets, the criteria for personality disorder is a whole different story, but like personality pathology it shows up regardless. And at times of increased stress, it rears its ugly head even worse. So what screamed at me from all of those interviews is PD, and very much borderline aspects of that. That's definitely the flavor I was getting from all of it.
Yeah, I've been calling her a whole cluster B for a long time.
Yeah. Yes, and all of the B's.
She's all the B's.
That's so interesting. I had my best friend who passed away had borderline, and I think that you're right. You absolutely had to change your approach sometimes, and especially with her relationships, or when a relationship ended, or because then all shit would hit the fan. I mean, actually that's kind of what led to her passing away. Like she ended up taking tons and tons of benzos, and then stopped taking them, like, after the breakup, going through all the emotions, like overloaded on benzos, then just quit taking them cold turkey and went into cardiac arrest. Yeah, but you definitely had to change your approach with her. You know what I mean? Because one thing wrong would, like, if you say the wrong thing, you can send her at least into like a
tailspin.
My approach is ghost. I don't change nothing. I just bounce. My brain can't handle it. I know this about myself. It's better for everybody all involved if I just dip.
Have you ever had one come after you after that, Jen?
Once, but she's dead now, so it's okay. It's the only person that is that I have blocked on Facebook. She's still blocked. She's been dead since 2017. She's still blocked.
Wow.
It's the only person I ever blocked on Facebook.
Why do you think that they have a hard time just being ghosted?
Oh yeah, because that abandonment piece is like the hallmark of it. And so, like, if you're going to ghost them, or if you're going to break up with them, they'll show you like that vengeance, the revenge. Like, they are not.
And that's what she did.
Yeah.
She went after my kids.
Oh,
Mhm.
Yeah.
And, oh yeah, after that. And Law and Order Amber says, I have BPD and ADHD and it's rough. I'm not someone that's easy to be friends with, so I don't have friends. You have friends, you got us.
You
But
guys
if
got us. What you talking about? What
if
you
I
mean,
was,
hey?
I
See,
deserve the consequences.
can I just say, Leonard Amber, like that is so insightful, right? And I really hope that nothing that I'm saying is coming across as offensive at all, because that is not at all my intent. You know, people who have been diagnosed and are aware, and most of them, in my experience, are actively seeking treatment. They want help and they want to mitigate the symptoms and they want to learn how to cope. They want to learn how to tolerate distress. And so it's not like just because somebody's diagnosed with borderline personality or has features of borderline personality that it's hopeless. But the people who engage in
What Shmita
treatment,
say?
what's that?
What did
Keep going.
Shmita say? Oh, go
I
ahead.
put it
Sorry.
on the screen. Yeah, keep
Okay.
going, 22. I put a comment on the screen. We're used to multitasking. You're like, wait, what? I'm sorry.
But you know, there is very effective treatment for people with borderline personality, called dialectical behavior therapy, and even some cognitive behavioral therapy techniques. But Letecia strikes me as someone who wants a very simple explanation and isn't going to put in much work to get better, or acknowledge that, you know, there's anything wrong with her. She seems very much like she likes to scapegoat and blame things, and she is the last person that's going to take responsibility for her actions, which is,
Those are the people that I can't handle. It's we all have something. Look, you guys have met me. I'm not 100% all the time a fucking peach. Okay, I got issues, but I try at least to acknowledge that I have issues and work on them. That's very different than somebody like Letecia, who's running around unchecked. And even when she does get checked, she blames everybody else. She takes no accountability. I have all the patience in the world for somebody who's trying to work on themselves, because I am always trying to work on myself.
Yeah, same here.
I don't have patience for people who just run around and blame everything on everybody else. And now it's Maria Sanchez.
Well, that's what I'm about to get into, because right before cross, he starts to ask about the switch to Maria, and he's like, what she remembers from it. She doesn't remember much, but she does say that she wondered, was she in this state of mind when she killed Gannon? She said Maria was incoherent and rambling and psychotic. She would have liked to have an MRI or an EEG, to see aspects consistent with certain brain damage, also looking for seizures and things like that. Now, you guys that weren't on Crime Curious, she actually went into about the EEG. So when that happened, there was a whole thing about the defense, withdrawing their motion to get the EEG, and she was confused. She's like, well, they told me that the state wouldn't pay for it. What actually happened was, in a hearing back in October, they did have a hearing over the EEG. Crime Curious read her notes from that hearing. So if you missed that live, definitely check it out. But basically, they had decided they wanted to do it a certain way, couldn't do it. So they decided to do it at the jail. But then they weren't able to bring the equipment to the jail. And then they removed their request. So they were dishonest with her, but it wasn't exactly what it seemed like. They still did try, and there was a process of that testing, but they weren't allowed to bring the equipment to the jail. So that's kind of how it happened. If you missed that, though, you definitely want to hear about what happened in that hearing, because there's more to it than just what it seemed like from today. Okay, and then to keep going just for a second, she was more than frustrated over this EEG thing. And then he asked her about how much she gets paid. He said $300, and she said, well, it was $350. I thought that was kind of interesting. But right after that, she makes this statement. She is, quote, one of the most complex mentally ill people I have ever came across. And I want to know what you guys think about that, and keep in mind what we heard from Al and Letecia. Remember, Al's mom had tried to get her to get help for a long time. She kept seeing, signs in her. I think she's mentally ill. I don't think she was insane by any means, but I definitely think that she's mentally ill, and there are signs of that. What do you guys think? And most complex mentally ill people I've ever come across. That's a huge statement.
I mean, she interviewed Ted Bundy and what's his name? Tons. I mean,
She
and
made
Ted
out
Bundy
with
was a
Bundy.
fucked up duck. I mean, do
Maybe
you know
Ted
how
Bundy had
rare
syphilis.
necrophilia is?
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Ooh.
No, I mean, necrophilia is not that is not something that very many people have, which I've always found interesting that Ted Bundy would never admit to the necrophilia. But not that surprising, really, because they all keep something. But whatever, that's not the point.
So Al's mom is a psych nurse practitioner. Yes. Did you say she had syphilis?
I said, what if Ted Bundy had syphilis, made out with Dr. Lewis, gave her syphilis, and now we're just starting to see
the side effect of the crazy. I do think that Letecia is a complex, mentally ill person. Because
I think that's an insult to mentally ill people, Jen.
You think so?
So
I don't mean it to be offensive. I do think that her particular psychopathy, and it's also like some of it is just who she is inherently as a human.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it would make it very difficult to treat her, because first of all, you would have to get her to agree that not even that she is the problem. I think the first step would be for her to admit that she might possibly maybe be the problem, which I think would be it would take an act of Congress to get her to admit that. I'm serious. So that is complex.
Well, in my opinion, and I'm sure that Dr. B and I would probably have differing opinions. I'm under the impression that she's a clinical psychologist. So clinical and counseling kind of looks at a strength-based perspective, and clinical kind of looks at a deficit-based, meaning like they look at what's wrong. Counseling psychologists tend to look at what's right. So my whole opinion on just diagnosing in general, I think as a society, we over-pathologize things that probably exist on a continuum. And if you think about like the standard curve, the majority of the patients that I've seen, not all, but the majority, fall within that kind of normal 1 or 2 standard deviations above the norm. We all have something, like you said earlier, we all have something that we could work on. We all have things that ail us: insomnia, anxiety, clinginess, what have you, ADHD. But when we pathologize people, we kind of otherize them, right? And in a way, we give them an opportunity to potentially use that as an excuse or a justification as to why something is outside of their control, getting better, working on coping with the stress, et cetera, et cetera. So I think, Letecia's got some shit going on. She's certainly not normal. I hate the word normal to begin with.
Normal is very relative.
Yeah. But I don't think that she's like schizophrenia. I think of people with severe schizophrenia, with bipolar 1 that struggle to maintain medication compliance. Like that's what I think of when I think of severely mentally ill people who, without a medication and consistent involvement in mental health care, are going to unfortunately end up unhomed or in prisons. But
I don't think she's severely mentally ill. I think she's complex. I think just who she is as a person is complex.
Yeah, that's true.
That's what I think. I don't know about severe, but I think she's very she's just complex.
Yeah.
My unsophisticated diagnosis is fucked up duck.
Hot mess NOS.
Well, this is her opinion. She said her opinion is she was psychotic at the time Gannon was killed. She was not in touch with reality. She didn't know the difference between right and wrong. That is exactly what she said.
I have thoughts about that as well.
Well, let's hear them. And I got to know what was the tone in the courtroom, the vibe once you were like coming up on cross. Did it change? Because that's where we're coming, and it felt like it changed. Like, whew. I feel like you could feel the tension in the room during cross.
It was on fire when he started. I got the vibe. I can't give you any objective reason for this. That there was kind of a collective sigh of, okay, now we're going to cut the bullshit in the gallery. Like, all right, now it's on like Donkey Kong. Because obviously defense let her get away with a whole bunch of fluffy shit.
Yeah, it definitely was on like Donkey Kong. What's your thoughts on the psychotic at the time Gannon was killed, not in touch with reality and not knowing the difference between right and wrong?
So it's lovely for her to be able to say psychotic at the time, but that doesn't mean anything. And as a psychiatrist, she has doctor words instead of that. And there's ways to describe that, like a psychotic break, not a crack. But a psychotic break isn't a diagnosis. It's something that can occur in different types of diagnoses, but it's not in and of itself a diagnosis. I think what she's really trying to describe, or at least what I can remember of the words Dr. Lewis used, is a dissociative episode. And she's right about dissociation existing on a continuum. Like when I walked into that courtroom for the first time today and felt like I, wasn't supposed to be there for some reason, even though it's open to the public, like I feel like I dissociated for like 5 seconds when I first walked in. Like, am I going to get kicked out? And it's just that kind of out of body experience. Like if you've ever almost rear-ended someone or watched someone almost rear-end you, and it's like that moment of like nothing else exists, you're kind of just ready to respond. I don't know how you could murder another person and not dissociate unless you were a complete psychopath, right? Like that has to be a very surreal experience. And psychologically, it seems normal that you would automatically dissociate at a time like that because it's horrific, the shit you see, right? And so I think what they're describing is kind of a normal response to an extremely abnormal situation, but not inherently an insanity response or a pathological response.
Right. Not you're psychotic and don't know the difference between right and wrong.
Exactly. There were too many things that happened prior to her making the fatal wounds where she knew what she was doing was wrong. Like based on some of the things we've discussed in here, like it was a progressive thing. She hurt him, something happened, she spilled the candle to cover it up. She gradually started to realize she was approaching the point of no return. And instead of taking the risk that Gannon would report her and someone would believe him, she decided that she needed to take him out of the equation.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, when you think about like those searches that were done before for the U-Haul and the things she was searching in the days before about doing everything for the kids and, oh my God, this was building up in her. And yeah.
One thing that they haven't really talked about, which probably, I mean, they're not going to because it's not really necessary for the purposes of this trial, but what I would like to know is, it seems that right around maybe the day before Al was supposed to go out of town, there's some interesting searches that Letecia does. I need to know what, like, just for my own purposes, I just need to know, what was the mood of the household before Al went out of town? Because it seems from those searches and just all the phone calls and the texts and all the things, that Letecia had become resentful, but for whatever reason, this going out of town trip was something that was like the straw that broke the camel's back. I'm not saying that's why she did it to Gannon. What I'm saying is, it seemed like for whatever reason, this trip, him going out of town this time, set her off in a different way than it had before. She wasn't just mad. She was looking stuff up, like moving, to move and jobs and apartments and stuff like that. And I'd like to know what was going on.
The thing is, they just got back from that cruise. I mean,
I know. That's why it doesn't make sense. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like, what was the big freaking deal about this time? This is part of the deal, Letecia. So why was this time this is the time cruise, she really flipped her shit. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I interrupted you. I apologize.
No, you didn't.
One of the things that I thought of when Dr. Niederhauser was testifying this morning, and I don't know if there's any, like, this is just a theory, but the letter that she had to quit her job. And where does that line up with the cruise? Like, what if she needed time off to go on the cruise that fell outside the holiday break and work wasn't giving it to her? And that's why she had to suddenly quit that job. Like, I don't know. That was a thought I had this morning, because that's
interesting.
There is an element of malingering too, Letecia, and she will do whatever she has to do. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
To get what she needs.
Yeah.
And she's
you
not
know
above
what?
lying.
I think Susanna's talking about you, 22. She wants to know what's the expert's opinion on the dang Google searches. Who does that? You're our expert. Are you for our YouTube court?
You're our expert witness.
Yeah, our expert witness.
We don't have $3.50 an hour, so I'm just going to let you know that's not in the budget.
I mean, like everything you guys have said so far, it's basically her diary, right?
Yeah. Al cheating in Colorado Springs. I'm sorry. That is just comical to me. Like, what did she think she was going to get? Al Stauch cheating in Colorado Springs.
Okay, this is what I think she was going to get. I think she was looking, like I told you last night, I think that she was looking to see if there were like any articles or cheater because Google will also bring up shit that's on Facebook.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I don't know I'm sure Google got very confused by the amount of periods she put in random places, but maybe that's why it didn't yield the results she was looking for, because Google was like, fuck this bitch. You can't even type right, lady.
I did hear the $3.50 was a discounted rate. 22, would you know, like, what would be a standard for somebody like an expert of that? She's, got a really nice looking background to testify in a case like that. Have you heard of anybody doing that you know in the field? Or
so yes, I do have answers to that, but I don't know if I want to say them, because
well, that's okay then. Yeah, we'll just
probably know somebody that I know that many on YouTube
know.
Yeah,
you're in the area too. I forgot. Well, that's all right
then. Well, no, actually, this person was not anywhere near Colorado, but they provided testimony in quite a similar trial, or similarly widely publicized trial. I want to say that $300 is quite low. I mentioned on Crime Curious's channel that I recently had a court case myself, and the experts that I paid, it was a civil case. The experts that I paid were not doctors by any stretch of imagination. And I think $3.50 is probably about what they charged an hour for testimony.
Wow.
So that would be quite low for somebody as experienced as Dr. Lewis. I would almost say like $800 to $1,000 an hour would be something I would expect. Although the state may have limited what she could charge.
Oh yeah, she was getting state. Well, that was the thing. The judge asked for because he needed to submit the billing, and he wanted the name, and the defense attorney said, with all due respect, I'll never, and I know I'm quoting this verbatim because I'll never forget this. Crime Curious said that the defense attorney said I keep wanting to say Tortellini, but I know that's not right. Tellini said, I don't know why, but I keep wanting to call him Tortellini. Tellini said, with all due respect, Your Honor, you don't need to know because the state isn't paying.
Did he say that?
Yes, he did.
I didn't hear that either. Wow.
Jennifer said he said that. Were you not listening? She talked about it yesterday.
I don't know. I mean, no, I didn't hear her say that. I was listening, but also, I mean, like today when we were on there, I was also eating a taco for Taco Tuesday and trying to get the kids to listen to me. I ate a whole
bowl of rice while you guys were chatting earlier. I haven't eaten all day. I'm starving. Feel like that Chris Farley in the mall. Lay off me, I'm starving.
Well, I'm gonna go on, you guys, to the cross. So this was like a very tense moment, and so as soon as he takes over. They start to get into the legal definition. And she says the nature of what you've done and that it was wrong. And he says, did you look into the statute? And, she says, yeah. And he says, well, tell us the elements. That's what you're here for. I mean, you are the expert. These are quotes too from him. And she said, look, I believe at the time she was psychotic. She was getting very aggravated with him, like, asking this question so many times in different ways. She said she was psychotic. I'm not certain she even knows that. She did it now as we speak. And I thought when she said that, we see her like mold her story around the evidence. She knew exactly what took place. But then he says, well, in your other reports, you define insanity by the law of that state that you're in. Why did you not do that in this report? Well, who wrote the report? Well, I wrote it, but I didn't type it up. I sent it to the defense to type up. And then she says she is and was psychotic. Therefore, she was insane and did not know right from wrong or what she was doing. And so
that's not the statute.
I know
for Florida or for Colorado.
I know. Now it is basically, but that was a very tense moment because she didn't know. And I guess in her other report, she puts, she outlines in this state to be legally insane, blah, blah, blah. This is the criteria and they've met the criteria. She did not do that in this one.
Right. Because that's what Dr. Torres did. She pointed out where she does not, what the criteria was and why she did not meet it. And that's what they were expecting from Dr. Lewis, but Dr. Lewis didn't do it. And she got really confused at this point. And this was a moment I did feel bad for her. I did.
Yeah, I did too. Texas mass shooting suspect accused of killing 5 neighbors was taken into custody tonight without incident. Just to let you guys know if you were watching that or anybody is. Riddler just sent me an email about it.
Oh, okay.
What were your thoughts, 22, on this beginning part of the cross where she didn't know the statute? What was it like in the courtroom in this moment? This is the moment I thought probably felt really tense.
I mean, for me, it was like the itch was being scratched. My itch was being scratched. So this is not the first time that I've mentioned that I used to work for the Army, but a big part of my job when I worked for the Army was doing mental health evaluations for a variety of circumstances, right? If somebody needed a security clearance or go to sniper school or what have you, we had to do mental health evaluations. But we also had to do them before they were essentially kicked out of the military to make sure that, basically, the short backstory is obviously after however many years at war, there were a lot of people that were misdiagnosed with a personality disorder or something else that were kicked out for doing X, Y, or Z, when really it was untreated PTSD that was manifesting in all of these ways that weren't compatible with continued service. And so we ended up firing, for lack of a better way to put it, a whole bunch of soldiers with horrific untreated PTSD. And so then I don't remember what year it was, but they started requiring mental health evaluations before you would separate people. And part of that was knowing what the standard was, right? I could find post-traumatic stress in somebody who was getting kicked out of the Army for something, but if the post-traumatic stress didn't prevent them from understanding that the behavior they did that's getting them kicked out, for instance, snorting cocaine, was wrong, then they were still cleared to be separated from the military. So like, I am so used in my professional work to referencing the laws, referencing the regulations, knowing what the standard is before I do any evaluation, because that's what tells me what I'm looking for. That's what tells me, okay, if it goes beyond this, then that's something significant. But up until that point, this person, yes, they might have a mental condition, but that's not something that's going to keep them from, getting in trouble for, saying somebody in their unit or something like that.
So basically it's the very first thing you do and don't move on until you do. You need to know that. Exactly.
That and the licensure thing. Like anybody that knows me in my day-to-day life knows me. She's the one that knows the laws. She's the one that knows the rules. Like, because that something that is so diverse, and there's so many different theories and approaches to what we do in mental health, like you have to at least know where your right and left limits are. You have to know where those lines are so that you don't color outside them, or so that you know what's guiding your practice. So her not looking into whether or not she's legally allowed to evaluate somebody as a physician in the state of Colorado, and then not looking at what does Colorado law say about legal insanity. Like those are, if I was on the jury, those would be 2 check marks that I would be bringing up in deliberation over and over and over.
That is so interesting. And many people have said thank you for your service. And yes, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Appreciate it so much. Let's see. Anything, Jen, before I move on to the next part? And I'm going to read a few more things and get your thoughts. Okay. So then he gets on to, were you aware of this hearing? You were supposed to testify of why you needed the EEG and the MRI. She says, no idea. All I can say is I have begged to have these done. And he's like, so he starts asking, so did you consult her before her not guilty by reason of insanity plea on February 11th of 22? She's up there getting very frustrated. I've done all I can do. She says, I've called, doctors for free about this case. I begged the attorney to get this. They said the court wouldn't pay for it. I told them I'd never heard of this before. And he's like, are you aware the defense withdrew the request? And, we've talked about that already. There's little more to that story. If you go to Crime Curious's live from earlier, you'll hear about the hearings prior. She says, this is news to me now. At that moment, 22 tantrums, you put in chat, the jury is paying very close attention. I thought that was interesting. Then he says, in your book, you write, it's very easy to fake mental illness, especially DID. And that's why you want the EEG and the MRIs. She says, yes, to show impairment. And he's like, do you remember saying that, being a smart aleck? She's like, there it is. I said it. Yes, there it is. And he's reading her book. And then 22 writes in the chat, you could hear a pin drop in here. I was like, oh my God, I know it's tense.
Well, he basically got her to admit, so it sounded like her, and sorry for interrupting, Alex. It sounded like her initial preliminary report was kind of like, well, this is kind of what I'm seeing, but getting this and this would really help me firm up my opinion, right? Yeah. And then the court was like, or the defense lawyers were like, yeah, no, we can't give you that. And she was like, oh, okay, just kidding. So here's my opinion. And to me, that was just like, I think this is what's going on, but these things will make me confident in my diagnosis. And she didn't get those things. And she's like, well, sounds legit. I'll just put it on paper.
Yeah. I mean, he made a point. He made her look like, that's such an excellent way of describing that, because it's like, I would make this diagnosis, but I need more stuff. I didn't get that stuff, but I made the diagnosis anyway. And I think he definitely scored some points there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I typed into Crime Curious's chat while I was driving home, don't tell the police, that I wonder if Letecia's lawyers told her, like, hey, if you do this neuropsych testing and you invalidate it the way you did the rest of your psych testing, like, we're going to lose this witness. That was a thought that crossed my mind.
Yeah, I know that there was some talk from the judge to Letecia with respect to this, to her doctor, that she would have to cooperate. Because this doctor was the doctor that her team was using. As I remember Crime Curious talking about. See, Crime Curious and I talked a lot about Dr. Lewis at the beginning of the trial. Well, before the trial actually started, when we were just still in the jury part of it, jury selection.
The awesome
That's
thing.
That's how I found you, Miss Jen.
Oh, is it?
I think I left a comment on that video that you and Crime Curious did, and I was like, oh my God, these ladies are asking all of the same questions that I would be asking.
I need to know these things, dadgummit. Dr. Lewis was a real sticking point for me. And this is why I was upset, really. I wanted to understand how Dr. Lewis arrived at her diagnosis. And I never got that. That's what I was looking forward to hearing. And I never got that. And I felt just as disappointed with her testimony as I did with the end of that damn documentary, where I didn't get to see what she was freaking drawing in the drawing class. It was just as much of I hold on to resentments like that. I'm sure that's some kind of flaw, but I don't care because that's me. I will remember that shit till the end of time. I will be 92 years old with dementia, and that'll be the thing I remember.
Gigi,
Dr. Dorothy Lewis.
The Nightbot is dropping. 22 Tantrums should have a channel because she speaks so well. I love listening to you about this stuff. But I dropped Jen's Crime Curious, also Melissa and CDT, who are both in here tonight, and they're both covering the case as well. Okay, let me see what I got here. Okay, then they get into, why did Mr. Tellini contact you? And she said, she gives a few reasons, and as well as the documentary. And then here's another quote from her right around that time. She did not know the nature of what she'd done and or it was right and or it was wrong. Subsequently, she did not have control of what she was doing and could not conform her behavior. Her statements like that over and over start to worry me that the jury will hear that and walk away with, with something. Thank you, Radine. Thought it was very smart of prosecutors asking judge to request her attorneys don't discuss anything. I thought that was smart and interesting. Thank you, Radine.
Which seems to suggest that the prosecution is keenly aware of shenanigans, which makes me believe that I don't think that it was. I think it is exactly like Dorothy put it. If you tell me that the state will not pay for it, that is very, very different. That means it was asked for and it was rejected, which is exactly what they told her. That's very, very different than, look, we tried our best to get it. We had this plan, and, at the end of the day, Letecia's a flight risk because she acts a fool, especially when, she's got monster. Yep. And, we can't, the jail wouldn't let us bring in, an EEG. They should have been honest, and they weren't. And there was a reason that they weren't. And I think it's because I don't think they thought that I think that if they'd have known that if they'd have been honest, that maybe Dr. Lewis wouldn't have evaluated her.
I think that's possible too. And I think, that's reason for a lot of the shenanigans with this. Why that none of the family was talked to. You know what I mean?
Yes, why come? I need to know.
Kelly says the whole bookshelf hitting Letecia is confusing because Al said he saw no evidence of an injury from it. I thought that was this confusing too because, they make it sound like other people reported she was unconscious for 15 minutes. I want to know, is it self-reporting or is it coming from someone else? Because
it's self-report.
Yeah.
I feel like it's got to be self-reporting because first of all, why didn't she fill out a workers' comp? Now, she went to a whole doctor to get out of a contract, knowing that she had DID. Remember, because she said, I've created all kinds of personas my whole life to cope with stuff, blah, 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 right? So you know that you have some kind of issue going wrong, but you're willing to waltz into, that's risky. Anytime you think I want to take a personality test? Hell no. I don't want to be evaluated.
You would be so
Nobody
normal.
needs to know what goes on up in this brain of mine. I'm telling you right now.
I fearfully gave one to myself once, and I was depressingly normal.
I thought I would have
so much more unique than that.
I'm pretty sure that I might have some psychopathic tendencies, just a little bit. Not the kind that make you a serial killer, but like the kind that make you good at business. Just a touch, just a scotch.
It's socially acceptable. Like there are parts of every disorder, if you will, in the DSM essentially that are adaptable. They're functional in moderation, right? It's when we take anything to the extreme that it becomes pathological or it causes some sort of impairment.
Right, but I feel like somebody might see that and be, feel some type of way about it. So I will just avoid maybe potentially somebody feeling some type of way. Avoidance is clearly my coping mechanism. Dr. B will tell you I'm very good at avoidance.
Me too, definitely.
I have a PhD in that shit.
Okay, so
What?
then I'm gonna. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I just said it's energy conservation. Why start a discussion that you know you're going to get
Correct.
steamrolled in, or that you know the other person's not going to meet you in the middle or compromise?
Correct.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just have to walk the hell away because I'll blow up. It's
Self-preservation.
not good.
Okay, so then they get into this long story about the documentary about misdiagnosis with someone else, and then back to Letecia. She says that she likes to go back to childhood. She wants to hear from teachers, letters, journals, diaries, those kind of things, because you cannot retrospectively malinger. She also wanted to talk to Harley, but couldn't. She said she wasn't put in touch with anyone, and he says, "Why didn't you refuse to testify?" And she's like, "Huh?" And he's like, "Well, you refused to testify in another case without the EEG. Why didn't you refuse to testify?" She said, and I quote, "I probably should have." And she said, "I did the best I could with what I was given." He said, "Do you have a disregard for the rules here and an unconscious bias?" And she said, "No." Now, at this part, I want to know what her face looked like when he said, "Do you have a disregard for the rules here?" And also, does anybody think that it could be, well, how do you feel about ineffective counsel at this point with the things that came out today with these things?
I will tell you this. I will tell you this. Ineffective assistance of counsel is something that's raised all the time. It is very, very rarely successful. The bar to prove ineffective assistance of counsel is incredibly high. It's almost never successful. I'll give you an excellent example. Brandon Dassey. His attorney allowed the prosecution to test and evaluate Brandon Dassey without them being there. That is ineffective assistance of counsel. And do you know what? He didn't get it. It's a very, very, very difficult.
Well, that's good to know. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's very difficult. I mean, but in my opinion, and I'm not an attorney, but just from what I know of the law, this is not that.
Okay, 22.
They sought a good a doctor that was proficient in the field that they were seeking an expert opinion on. You can't get ineffective assistance of counsel just because your lawyer does shit that just because they fuck around and find out, like they pull bullshit. You can't get. I mean, I know that's not a legal term, but you know what I'm saying. Like that doesn't get it. Okay, that's it now, because 22 should answer. Not me.
I was gonna say I'm not a lawyer, but I played one on TV. I've never been in. So that would be a lie. So I feel like there were two separate moments, right? Where one, the prosecution was asking about like, does she have a license to practice in Colorado? And then the other one was about when she was supposed to show up at work or something. I don't know. She made some comment at some point where she put it back on the prosecution as like, I know you are, but what am I, or something. I mean, she didn't say that, but that's the way I interpreted it. And I didn't necessarily interpret it as a dig at the defense attorneys as much as it sounded like she was trying to say like the prosecution didn't understand something or was doing something wrong and the way they were coming at her. But I think she did concede, or from what I can remember. I don't know, I forget, the bailiff came up to me at one point and I kind of stopped listening.
Because she was chatting to us. Don't do that no more. Don't get yourself in trouble for us. Just wait till the breaks.
But where I thought that,
true psychopath a negative psychopath would be like, do it. Just do. Fuck that bailiff.
Well, it was in front of Agent Grusing too. So like, I don't know. Does he still have handcuffs?
No, because he's a former agent.
He had a cell phone out the whole time. I will say that. Sorry, Agent Grusing, you were very kind, but
now you're snitching on
that it was okay.
You're snitching on my friend, Agent Gruesome, the one that I'm most interested to meet.
Yeah, I told him all that you guys thought his testimony was amazing.
You should give him the channel name. And let's see if we can give him my email next time you're up there and see if, God dang it, I can't even open the door. And see if he'll come on the channel. I would love to talk to him.
He's local.
Yeah. Come on, do me a solid. Be a good homegirl.
You can, Jen. You can probably email him.
I got
too.
you. I got you. I might be able to get some.
How am I going to find his email, Allie? What am I going to go to Google and look up Agent
No, it'd
Gersing?
be on the
He
FBI
works for the
website.
school.
Letecia.
At school, you might be able to reach out to him there.
Ooh,
Maybe.
Okay. Yeah, and the FBI website. You'll probably find it. But
Girl, I ain't trying to get involved with the FBI. I'm not trying to look. You click on something on the FBI. Look, I already told you my search history is questionable.
He does have security consultations, I think he said.
I need security. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to consult him about some security.
Maybe
I can't. It took me forever to get this door open. It was stuck on something. Sorry, you guys.
I think the prosecution got Dr. Lewis to concede a few things that she wasn't planning to concede. But also, like, there were some times, was it yesterday or Friday, when the last witness for the prosecution was going over the timeline, and I noticed, like, he definitely, I think, Jen, you said it yourself yesterday, like, he definitely got to dig in wherever he could. But there were some places where defense could have objected on grounds of speculation, because the witness was saying, like, this is what Letecia was trying to do. Yeah,
there were he mainly on the question of, is this what somebody does when they're trying to evade?
Yeah,
and so that the way that they asked the question is wrong.
And his statement about hiding Gannon. No, who was hiding him? She was, like, the way that. Yes.
Yeah. But they did object one time to the form, and he changed up the way he asked the question. But there was other times when he asked the question kind of the same way, and it should have been objected to, but it wasn't. So, but those are not like, even if let's say she's found guilty moving forward, which she will be, but not, they throw just straight guilty, and she appeals, which she will. They're going to look for errors, but the errors in the trial have to be such that if they had not occurred, would a reasonable jury, would that change the outcome of the trial? Those are hard to mount too. They got to be real egregious. Right.
Did you, we did hear her say he lied to me, and it's very interesting. I honestly feel bad for her. She's an older lady, which already has me feeling sympathy for her. She got put up there and made, she was not prepared at all. Like, with even just the statute in Colorado, the very first question.
She just talked to him. She just talked to Letecia 3 hours ago. What were they doing for 3 hours is what I want to know.
I do too. He goes on to ask what crazy, not insane means. And she says, sometimes individuals have a very severe mental illness, but not legally insane. But they can be crazy as a bed bug, she said. He said, well, I'd like to talk to you about Colorado specifically, but not sure if you can.
He did throw shade, but he was definitely not a Mima bully, because if he was, I would be all over that. We don't bully Mimas where I'm from.
Well, he also tried to kind of say, basically, she tried to say to him that the witnesses would be skewed or biased because they came from the state and that kind of thing. That was a really interesting part, which came next.
But she also said that if he had called her and asked her to evaluate Letecia, she would have, for him as well.
And she also say she's never been called by the prosecution?
She hasn't. Well, okay, so she, at one point, she did work for the state. When she was working at Bellevue, she was working for the state.
Hey, Teresa. Teresa said she felt like he was a bit of a bully. See? I read a comment in the beginning. I was saying opinions are all over. It's really interesting.
It might be because I have some, like, I'm from the 80s, and it takes a lot for me to say somebody is a bully. So, like, it has to be, I'm probably way desensitized and don't pick up on subtle social cues, or even sometimes what would be obvious to other people's social cues that they're going too far. Because to me, if they're not crying, you've not gone too far. So that might be, my views are very subjective. Yeah, don't be listening to JennLu on that.
Anybody that thinks cross-examination is supposed to be easy
Right.
has never been on that witness stand. It's not easy.
It's not.
really hard to
That's
keep
where
it cool.
that's what I like to, when I used to cover trials before, that's what I would play, is the cross examinations, because the easy part is direct. Look how easy it was for her on direct. They're on your side and you're their witness, and you have some familiarity. But but cross is where all the nitty gritty comes out, and that's my favorite part. So that's
Teresa.
probably also why I don't think people are bullies, or I didn't think he was being a bully.
Teresa, I'm dropping the link if you want to come up and give your thoughts on today. If you can't, that's fine too. I'm curious to hear what you say. She says, no, I'm not sensitive. He was a bit of a bully, LOL. Then Radine says, missed the morning. Why was the doctor late for court? She said that she shows up when she was told. She said she wasn't told to be there until 2 today. Which was very, interesting, because that was not when they were supposed to start. And they
But you might have missed this part. Tell her about what that courtroom smelled like when she came.
Yeah, I heard that.
But it was her son. And I remember from the documentary, her son was in charge of managing her for the most part. Like she would handwrite her book. And he was in charge of like typing it and stuff. So now I'm kind of wondering, God, see, Allie, being around you, and you've got such a good heart. And now I got to soften a little bit. And now I'm kind of worrying that maybe the pothead son, and there is stoner time and then other people time. And that's just the way it works.
Hey,
You would
Teresa.
think that for somebody that does this for a living, like, would be a little bit more diligent about knowing their schedule. And I don't know. Again, they couldn't have been staying that far from the hotel unless they had a freaking hotel in Denver.
I feel like that might have been out of the budget.
Hi, ladies.
Hey.
Hi, T.
I only have like 2.2 because I'm literally in the car and soccer practice is almost over. So, but I had to come join you because I do feel like he was a bit of a bully. And I'm going to say that obviously with the caveat that he's supposed to be a bully, it is cross-examination. But I think he could have easily proved all of those things without having to kind of get the nasty tone with an 85-year-old lady. I didn't like that. And the reason I think he was a bully was because it gave me that yucky feeling in my stomach that she was going to walk away going like, this guy's really not nice. And I think for her, she's trying to educate people on something that she knows obviously a lot about, one, and two, that the majority of our world doesn't know a lot about. And his tone was just too much for me. I did not like it. I like when they treat them the same and can get to the same point. He should have treated her just like he treated the other ladies that were up there, Grimmett and Moore and all of them. And he could have got the exact same result, in my opinion.
He did. I don't know. He did kind of flirt with Torres a little bit. So maybe that would have been a step too far too.
Well, I have to agree with you. I don't know that I'm not saying that he was a bully, but I did see other people think that. But I think that he could have done it in a much more,
He could have softened it.
Yeah.
Well, people are like, yeah, she's a little old lady. She is a little old lady. I think that there's a difference between being able to prove your point and also having respect for another human being. This woman that's on the stand did not murder an 11-year-old boy. Right. So I think that treating her disrespectfully when she is, I mean, we can argue it, but it's pretty black and white. She is a little old lady. I don't know.
I mean, she is a little old lady. You're not going to get an argument from me there.
Having respect for your elders is a lot different than proving a point. And he could have proven a point without being an asshole. And I don't even think he was a huge asshole. I said he was a little bit of a bully.
Yeah. I mean, I think he gets too emotional. I think that, remember yesterday, he gets a little worked up. Even Michael Allen is like he's like, if I can get a word in, please, like, calm down. Let me get a word in. I think things just would come across better if he wasn't so intense with his, like, he's invested, which is good. I think that's good. But, it has its downsides too.
I think that, so Crime Curious said like that, the other ones didn't delay the trial. which I understand that as well. But I think it was proven today that the people who were delaying the trial were actually her attorneys and causing a lot of rift and not actually communicating on the things that needed to be communicated, which is not a surprise to me in the slightest. But I also think that the other people who evaluated her, and goes against the prosecution for me, have never dealt with a single person physically diagnosed with DID.
That's because it's that rare. It's that rare.
But my point is the prosecution could have gotten another expert, because Dr. Dorothy Lewis is not the only expert on this topic. They could have gotten somebody else to evaluate her and come in and say, hey, this is my experience, and actually have an expert to expert rebuttal instead of an attorney going up there and didn't actually know the answers to some of the questions he was asking, which is rare because attorneys typically won't ask questions that they don't know the answer to already. But I don't know. Like I said, my issue was that he could have gotten exactly what he wanted without the tone to an elderly woman. And I'm not the only one who's going to feel that way. I promise you that.
No, a lot of people felt like that. You're right, Teresa. A lot of people did.
And I was telling them in the beginning, I was looking on Twitter that it was actually much more mixed than you would think. You know what I mean? There's a lot of people who thought he went too hard with her. Kate says, I have DID. Oh, I bet watching this is very interesting for you. Teresa, but since you only have a second, do you have any other thoughts about today? Do you think that it could have swayed the jury at all? I saw comments that said it was compelling testimony. Some people think, it was the exact opposite. So that I want to hear.
No, I don't. She's never once even sat on that stand and said that she was not guilty by reason of insanity under Colorado law. She said she was psychotic.
Right.
So she won't even say the words because she didn't have the test that she needed to have. So I think that I don't think it's going to sway anybody. The defense is their own worst enemy. They have their expert up there, and they don't even have their expert. Their entire strategy, they don't even have her on the stand for a half a day while they're questioning her. The prosecution had a half a day with the timeline guy. You know what I mean? Like, come on, you got you're not even
a little more effort.
Show the parts that make it so that she has it. Show the parts that made Dr. Dorothy Lewis go, hey, this is what these are the points that I had. Why aren't we seeing that? Why is the prosecution now questioning her longer than the defense? And we're not seeing anything that Dorothy saw. But they're going to play her,
and they're going to play her thing. They're going to play her interview with Letecia tomorrow. The prosecution is going to play the video, which would have been, Alice, don't do it. You're about to step on this my phone. She's done. She's like, I don't want to hear any more about Dr. Lewis or fucking Letecia Stauch.
Melissa said, I'm busting caps, but I promise I'm disagreeing respectfully. But just to say.
No, and I totally get it. And I'm okay with anybody that actually disagrees.
Yeah.
That's totally fine. Mine literally comes from, it was the feeling that I got that I was like, this is not going to go over well, because as much as anybody here who listens to trials or understands that that's a cross, and obviously she's an expert, she's done it before, the jury is just basic human beings. And I'm telling you right now, they don't care. Oh, this one was an expert, she should totally be able to handle it. They're not like that. You know what I'm saying? Like they're the ones that are going to be like, wait a minute. And the defense did it too. They had their little snide comments with other ones that I still didn't appreciate and thought was a little bit rude, but I didn't think this prosecution team.
She's 85 years old. You're right.
And this prosecution team just didn't need to do it. I
think
didn't. That for me was kind of like, that was what gave me like you didn't have to go there. You've done so well and been so professional. You could have kept going that way, but it's still, to me, not enough that it's going to sway shit. She's still not guilty by reason of insanity. She still killed him, and that is what it is.
You're right. I agree. What do you think about her? Okay, so did you watch this morning when they were trying to work out what was even going to happen with Dr. Lewis, and the judge read Letecia her rights as far as testifying goes, and she said that she was going to wait until. What do you think now that Dr. Lewis has testified? Because I can imagine. Look, the truth of the matter is, they're going to go tomorrow I'll be streaming it if you want to come up, Teresa, or just chill out or whatever you want to do, because they're going to show the video. He is, and it's going to be obviously the video where she's Maria. And do you think that Letecia will testify?
I think that she's so narcissistic that she wants to, but she also seems to have some faith in these attorneys. So I don't know. But I think she wants to, and I don't think she's going to walk away from this feeling like Dr. Lewis did her any favors, and she's the only one that can save her.
That's what I think. I think she's going to do it.
I think she's going to do it. If she does, I feel like we're in for another week of trial, though.
Oh, God almighty. I remember when I thought she was going to be her own attorney, I was like, Lord, have mercy, help us. I don't know how we're going to get through this trial, because giving her that kind of freedom and I want to read this. Kate has DID. She said, it feels like an injustice that she is using DID as a defense. It's an insult to the DID community. And I also want to say, Teresa, I agree with you. The fact that she couldn't get up there and at least just she couldn't even say what insanity, or not guilty by reason of insanity legally meant in Colorado. And he points out that she did that in all of her other reports.
And not this one.
No favors. Yeah.
I don't know why. And somebody in chat, I don't know who it was, but they said that it's basically like the defense's fault. They put her in this situation. Well, one, she is old, she's obviously old enough to make her own decisions. But two, I do agree. I think that the defense really set her up for failure. But like I said, I'm not surprised by that either, because I don't think they actually give two shits what happens to Letecia Stauch. And they don't want to pay this woman. They haven't even paid her anything.
I know. That shocked me. I'm like, because I was blown away by that. That was like, wait, what? Not even a penny? You ain't even got a penny?
And then they didn't even know the amount that she was getting paid. He's also, you're getting $300 an hour. She's like, I thought it was $350.
Yeah. I mean, I'm doing a discount. I'm giving you a discount, and you're still trying to lowball me, Dick. I don't know.
All right. Well, I gotta go because we got to go pick up dinner now. But thank you for dropping the link for me. And I know not everybody agrees, but I'm okay with it. I love you all anyway.
Thank you.
Love you too.
All right. Bye.
Bye, T.
Okay. Her net worth. I just looked this up. Her net worth is between, let me see here. Here's on Celebs Age Wiki. It says between 1 and 5 million, but another one said more than that. Let me see. Net worth in 2022 pending. Net worth in 2023, 1 million to 5 million. I saw more than that on another one. Hold on. Let me try to find it. I think that's interesting because it plays it. Why did she do this? Why did she take this case?
She's a bleeding heart.
I think at the core of who Dr. Lewis is, really, first and foremost, she's an advocate for changes in the mental health field as it pertains to our justice system.
Yeah, 100%. And I concur with her. I don't think somebody who's insane or can't understand what's going on should be executed. And I don't think somebody who so here's another case that some of you might be familiar with. Sorry to interrupt you, Jen.
No, you're fine.
The Planned Parenthood shooting that happened here in Colorado Springs back in November 2015. I want to say it was the day after Thanksgiving. The man who, I'm going to say allegedly, although he was 99.9% sure it was him, who was the perpetrator of that crime, has yet to be on trial. He's locked up. He can't pass a competency hearing, even though he said in the courtroom something to the effect of like, I killed them all, no trial, or something like that. They will not proceed with federal or state charges because he has not yet been deemed competent to stand trial. I think right now there's a case about whether or not they can forcibly medicate him in order to get him competent for trial. And I obviously the families of those that were killed and injured are probably agonizing over getting their day in court, but I think all of them would probably agree that, and I'm certainly not speaking for them, that they would like to see a sane defendant, yes, crime curious, Robert Deere, stand trial as opposed to a man mumbling under his breath who, the appeal is going to he's going to win on appeal because he should have never been on trial, right? But it's completely different and I think Dr. Lewis would agree with that, right? Like that is fair. That's our constitution. That's our legal system. But the gullibility factor to me, like, and I guess clinically I come from a different perspective with some of my background is, I believe my clients, but I don't buy it hook, line, and sinker because I understand that it's all on a continuum, right? And that there could be secondary gain, especially when I was in the military or working for the military. There's potential for a lot of secondary gain.
Well, there has to be in the criminal justice system. I mean,
hands down. So, I don't have anything professionally against her except for maybe that, I wish that if there were other people that bought into her hypotheses and her theories, then she wouldn't have to be the one testifying. Like Criminality was saying, there are other people who specialize in DID. And
I don't think that they were gonna. I don't think they would testify. I think anybody that specialized in DID
could see
would see it for exactly what it was.
Yeah.
I think that I think that there is an element. I don't know. I just have this sense, and I don't have anything like concrete that I can say right here on this date at this time. This is what happened. I don't have evidence of this, but I just have a strong suspicion that Dorothy felt some type of way about Letecia's case, and that she wanted to give her a fair shake. And I think she was a little bit, for lack of, I don't know another way to say it, but it feels to me like on some levels, she was bamboozled not only by Letecia, but also by Letecia's attorneys. And I think that Letecia's attorneys have been pulling bullshit for a while in this courtroom. And I think that the judge has been more fair than I've ever seen a judge be.
Yeah, he has.
Oh, yeah.
And her attorneys have, just like I said, I believe there's a reason she didn't speak to family members. I really do. I think that they have tried to manipulate her. And don't get me wrong, I know she's brilliant. I know she knows much more about this than really most of us, she does. I'm not going to sit here and talk like I know everything. I just don't. And, so don't get me wrong on this, but she's older. So I think that she's probably a little easier to fool, to convince. You, like you said, she has a bleeding heart. This is something she's passionate about. She never got all of the other tests that she needed. So like she said, she did the best that she could with what she had, and it just happens that the defense made sure she didn't have too much.
So
they didn't.
Sorry for interrupting.
So no, you're fine. I'm just agreeing with Allie. It just came out all weird because I'm tired.
with what Criminality was saying about how the prosecution's forensic psychologist didn't have any experience with DID, that's valid. I mean, I can't say that I would be a confident witness up there. I mean, I'll tell you right off the bat what things I am well versed in and which things I don't know about. Or which things I need to research more, because psychology is a huge field. But I would be curious if the prosecution asked Dr. Lewis, hey, of all the people you've treated and diagnosed with DID, how many of them were not in a prison uniform? How many of them were not defendants or convicted criminals? How many have you seen in the lay world who are law-abiding citizens? Because again, it seems like if your only tool is a hammer, then everything's a nail.
Yeah. Yep. Oh my gosh, that's a good phrase. And also, I think Teresa made an excellent point there. I hadn't even thought about that, but I would have loved to see them have someone that did have experience with DID. And that would, I just think that would have been very interesting. Black Belt Babe, thank you so much. She has a question, and I'd say it's probably for you, 22, or both of you guys, if you know. I don't really know much about it, but she says, can you all speak to the fact that psychopaths are notorious for successfully manipulating forensic psychologists and psychiatrists, especially one-on-one?
Well, I'm not qualified to diagnose that, but I mean, I think it has to do with the characteristics of a psychopath. That is how they are able to be successful at what they do, whether that is business or whether that is killing. Look what Ted Bundy did.
Mhm.
He was incredibly good at the lure. That's how those he asked for help. He came up to women looking as if he was, what's the word I'm looking for? Well, he used a cast and stuff like
Yeah,
that, but
injured.
unassuming.
Yes.
He came
Yeah.
across as unassuming. And so these women let their guard down. And he knows how to do it, and that is something that he perfected over time. Because it takes a minute. I don't think he was successful right out of the gate. But I mean, he did a lot of stuff as a kid that freaked the other neighborhood kids out. Yet none of the neighborhood kids ever told on him. He never got caught doing that. He used to set like tiger traps.
So
He
you're
would dig a
basically
hole.
saying he was super manipulative, right? Like he was easy.
Incredibly manipulative. They're also incredibly good for some reason at knowing what the other person needs them to be. That's what it is. They're really good at the chameleon.
Well,
Yeah,
isn't
they
that
can-
kind of what they do? Is like they watch how, because they
Yes.
don't really feel emotions, so
Yes.
they'll watch
Yes.
other people's. Oh, okay. Yeah. Do you see this a lot? Like with
Oof.
people being fooled by them?
So like I could maybe touch like, so I think that one of the experts talked about how psychopath is not actually a diagnosis in the DSM. Like that's more of a forensic type thing. But the closest thing in the DSM would be like antisocial or narcissistic personality disorders. And there's definitely a charisma to them, right? Like that's their shtick. They're con men. They're chameleons. It's the perfect word, Jen. And you feel good around them. And that's actually kind of a characteristic of most cluster B personality disorders, is like, if you ever notice yourself feeling like, wow, this person really likes me or they're flattering me, like that's a good indication that maybe somebody's got some cluster B traits, because they ingratiate themselves by kind of blowing some smoke up your ear, right? But at the end of the day, with forensic, and I'm assuming, so that's risky, but I'm assuming that most forensic psychologists worth their salt are going to be doing some testing. And our tests, like, I can't emphasize this enough, that our tests are real hard to fake. You might get away in like a clinical setting, but we've got more we can give you, right? If we have a feeling that there's somebody,
there's a test for faking, isn't there?
Oh yeah, there's one that we used to call the liar pants on fire test. Is our
I like that name
for it.
So can you explain that a little bit more?
How
does it work?
Let me think. So, and some of this is going to be, I'm going to filter myself a little bit while I fumble around with my words here because of trade secrets, right? Like I can't tell you guys too much about certain things, but like the forensic psychologist explained, I think they talked about the SIRS 2, which is the one that we called the liar pants on fire test. And
such technical terms.
I mean,
that's the one she scored the highest on.
Like behind closed doors, right?
Yeah, we know.
But there are questions that would be consistent with serious psychopathy. But they're questions that a lay person would think that they needed to report in order to appear the way they wanted the evaluator to think that they were, right? In order to fake bad, essentially. And
you mean like when Amber Heard answered yes to having all kinds of symptoms, which would make her literally like,
so generally, yes,
unable to function like that.
And similar to like the validity scales on the MMPI is that, it takes, you can see the difference between Dr. Lewis and the forensic psychologist that for the prosecution, right? And just the difference of their diagnoses, because it's an art, it's not a science. And so if you imagine the difference in how they conceptualize diagnoses, and then you take a lay person who has, maybe has a bachelor's degree in psychology, right? Which would be more education than most people. They might think they know what certain disorders look like, or what, a hallucination looks like, or they might think they know how to describe it. But at the end of the day, without adequate training, and I would argue too, without adequate professional experience, seeing some of these things firsthand, or at least seeing enough to know like what's really not fake, but like severe, right? You would never necessarily catch it. And so when people try to fake bad, it's pretty evident. And if it doesn't come out blatant, then there's more tests we can do to either clarify, or there's ways that we can sort out discrepancies, or why, like you saw them do this with some of the questions on the MMPI about like, well, why did you mark this one true versus this one? And we call those critical items. So there's certain items, if they mark true for them, that you would want to review with the client right away because they're signs of really concerning behaviors, but we don't use those in interpretation per se. So in other words, it's a long story long, you're going to have a hard time convincing a psychologist who has access to a full battery of tests that you have a serious mental illness if you don't really have one. Going into therapy and getting care that way, or even meeting with a psychiatrist face-to-face, I don't know why you would want to convince them that you had DID or one of the more serious mental illnesses. You might be able to get away with it there, but if somebody's going to testify about it, you're damn sure that the professional is going to make sure, in more cases than not.
How do you think she fooled her? Or do you think she fooled her? Or what do you think about that?
Well, Dr. Lewis can't do psych testing.
Right. Okay. Because she didn't have her. They weren't able to get the test she wanted, and the other tests too, I guess. Or
no, she's not good at she's saying this is what Dr. B does. Dr. B can administer tests, the MMPI, all those ones that she just rattled off the 11 billion acronyms for. That's what Dr. B does. But Dr. Lewis can't do that.
It's like psychiatrists have prescription pads. Psychologists have psych testing, and we kind of like, that's kind of, one of our shticks, right? Social workers can do a couple of them, but like if you ever went on any of the websites that sell psychological tests, like you have to verify your degree and credentials, and tests are rated by, I want to say like ABC, which refers to what level of credential you need to have in order to be authorized to buy that test from them. And then you also have to submit proof of you having that credential. Like for me, when I did my dissertation, I used a test of normal personality. I'm not going to name which one it was, for part of my data source. And I had a master's degree, and I believe I had a master's level license at the time, but I wasn't licensed at the doctoral level, obviously, because I was ABD, Letecia. And my doctoral chair had to fill out the paperwork because he was the one with his psychologist license and with the PhD, and it required that level of authorization that I would be administering this test under his supervision. So they're very guarded.
Kelly thinks that she doesn't believe that she has it. Do you believe that she's fooled her 22 tantrums? Or do you believe that she's doing a job?
Well, a thing happens if we don't ask enough or the right follow-up questions.
Okay.
And I wonder, I don't know Dr. Lewis from Adam, but I wonder if maybe she's taking what Letecia said to some extent at face value. And, I tried to call her daughter, or I asked to call her daughter, but in the absence of that, who am I to question what she's telling me? Sounds legit. Sign my name.
Right.
I don't know.
Jen, do you think she's fooled? And then I want to show you guys what KK said, but I got to know if you think.
I don't know. I kind of am starting to, the fact that she won't actually testify to what she was supposed to be testifying to, the job, what she was actually hired to do, which is to get up on that stand and say that Letecia Stauch is not guilty that she was insane at the time of the crime.
Right.
That's what she was paid to do. That's what they wanted her for. But she's not saying that. And in fact, in many instances, she's actually showing examples of when Letecia is feigning or malingering. However, I don't know they're not interchangeable. And I know they mean similar things, but I think it depends on the setting. I don't know, but because I'm not in that.
Malingering is actually a diagnosis, believe it or not. It's in the
There you go. That's the difference. So she is feigning. She gives examples like when she was talking about the accent. What she actually said, which I thought was really interesting, is that it sounded Russian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she did.
And
Yes.
there is I feel like Dr. Lewis would know the difference between somebody actually speaking Russian and somebody sounding like they were speaking Russian. And
So
she was in.
She's choosing her words very carefully and being
Well,
purposefully
correct.
vague at times. Okay.
Correct.
Wow.
Correct. That was the long and the short of it. Thank you for simplifying it, Allie. Yes.
I was trying to
tired.
make sense of it.
No, I'm tired, and when I get tired, I be rambling.
No, I love your rambles, JennLu.
Nobody loves rambles. I sound like fucking Dr. Lewis and Letecia right now, just a rambling and not even coming close to anywhere of an answer. It's a fucking. Do you believe? Yeah. Do you believe it's a yes or no? Either I believe she believes Letecia or I don't. The answer is no. I don't.
Okay. Do you? Because I want to tell y'all what Kate says, but I got to hear. Do you believe she believes her or no? 22 tantrums.
Oh, what was the question?
Do you believe that she believes her or that she's just doing her job and she's being careful with her words, like Jen is kind of saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. But I caused 22 to dissociate with that long ass answer.
No, you did not. You did not. I love it. The licensed psychologist in me who realizes like how much rides on the line if you do something that is unethical or illegal, right? Like I would never go on the stand and say something that I did not fully believe to be true, right? Can I factually prove it? I'll do my best to bring in objective data. But the way I was trained is like you write your notes, you write your reports as if you're going to get called into Congress to testify because you could, right? Back it up objectively. I observed, client reported, right? All of those things. And here's what I did to verify it with the tools available to me as a professional. I would hate to think that Dr. Lewis would be choosing now in her lengthy career, debatable as her theory might be, she has had a very prestigious career, and arguably she has contributed a lot to understanding in the research base. Whether or not it's usable by everyday clinicians like me is beside the point. I would hate to think that she would go up there and debase herself at this point. She doesn't need to be doing this, right? So that's my non-answer. I'm not going to say that I believe her or not, or that I believe she believes Letecia or not. But I really hate to think that any person who puts their life into doing this kind of work would.
Do you take an oath like a medical doctor?
I don't know. Do medical doctors actually take oaths?
I don't know, but
they take a Hippocratic oath. Yeah.
They hold up their, I've taken several oths in my, working for the government and the military. But I think
like to do no harm or whatever.
Well, more like defending the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic kind of oath. But no, I've never taken the Hippocratic oath. It's just part of our ethics code, right?
Right.
It's part of the law. You don't cause harm. You don't misrepresent things. You don't do the field dirty. You don't diagnose people you haven't evaluated, which if it's not clear, I'm not diagnosing Letecia. These are just my observations.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think what I'm saying with Dr. Lewis is I don't think she's debasing herself or getting up there and lying or putting her licensure and her career at risk. What I think it is that she was hired to do a job. She came in, she observed, she evaluated, and she wrote out thoughts. But she has stopped short of getting up on that stand and outright stating that Letecia was insane under the Colorado law, or any law for that matter, but ideally it would be Colorado. And I think it is those very ethics that are keeping her from saying those things.
That is such an
she's testifying to what she observed, but she's not gone so far as to actually say that she was insane at the time of the murder. So I think that's proof of her ethics. Do you follow what I'm trying to say? Because I know I'd be circular talking at this late hour.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing you say, Jen, is that basically like Dr. Lewis's choice of words, calling it a psychotic, however she phrased it, that's not actually a thing in the DSM.
She was in some kind of psychosis, is what I
Yeah,
think she said.
which again, that's not a thing. Like we've got like brief psychotic disorder. I can't remember if psychotic break has been removed from the DSM or not. But there's a lot of diagnoses where you can have psychotic features. Like my impression, just based on the recordings and listening to what I would have, if I was doing the evaluation, I would have been looking seriously at like a bipolar 1 with psychotic features type explanation, because homegirl was talking a mile a minute and she had so many, it seemed like she was showing evidence of a lot of symptoms consistent with potentially a manic episode. But like you don't have to be dissociating to be considered legally insane in Colorado. Like it's
No, there was
interesting
there was a different way they could have gone
and the
and still maybe
psychosis
tried to
maybe.
get to the level of insanity under the law. They didn't have to go DID. And that's what I don't understand that either. I'm very confused about that.
And the way that defense was interviewing all of the psychologists, it was like, well, couldn't she have this? And isn't this a symptom of borderline? And it was like grabbing at straws, right? Just agree with us that there's something wrong with our client. It's like, dude, of course there's something wrong with your client.
She murdered an 11-year-old. There's something wrong with her. I think that's pretty clear.
Yes. And then can't that be something that makes her legally insane? Like, can it be? Yeah, a lot of people.
Like they're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
Yes.
Okay, listen. So my computer died and I lost a string of comments, but I kind of have it. Kate has the ID. She said when it was said she created them, and that was why the psychologist used this to dismiss. I disagree with that. Her next comment was, that can happen based on what she knows. And then she was asked if oh my gosh, she was asked, okay, so if you have DID, would people in your family know, like they were saying in court, people would obviously be trying to get you help? And she said no, not necessarily. So she has some really interesting comments. I'm gonna have to go back through later and look, but I think that's
what Dr. Lewis said.
No, Kate in the chat who says that she has DID.
The family wouldn't necessarily know.
That she said that her family wouldn't necessarily know if she had DID, that it could be like, she doesn't think Letecia has it, but she's just saying those are points that she doesn't agree with, that the family would know, and that that you can't create an altar. She said you do create your altars. She's like, but you're not aware of, the host is not aware of it until later on. But the way that she worded it, I don't know. We'll have to go back through and grab it. I lost a string of comments when it died, but
it sounded like Dr. Lewis was kind of like saying, like trying to say that it's both ways, right? Like that what'd she say? That altars leave evidence of themselves throughout a person's life. And then, when she couldn't interview Letecia's family, like, that's okay, I can still diagnose it. I don't need anyone else to tell me that they saw evidence ever.
One thing that I found problematic with some of the things that Dr. Lewis was saying that was somewhat contradictory to things that she'd said previously, not so much on the stand, but just in other places, like in the documentary, is that usually there is at least one alter who is the one that holds the abuse, the trauma that was so severe that caused the personality to split, as it were. And it seems to me that, because that is what DID is, it's a for lack of a better word, the way that I understand it, it is sort of a defense mechanism that your brain, whatever happened to you, is so traumatizing and so egregious that in order to keep, your brain will do whatever it has to do so that the rest of your systems will survive. And in this case, what it does is it splits into different personalities. So the whole thing about it would seem that Letecia would not be without therapy, without ever having gone in and having a prior diagnosis or just a prior therapy at all, would be unaware of the abuse, because that's the whole reason for creating the altar, so that the host, the main personality, doesn't know about it, doesn't have to live with it, doesn't have to deal with it. It puts it in a little compartment. I mean, we all kind of do things like that in our day to day. We don't, dwell on things that are unpleasant when we have to be, like at work. You're able to separate what's going on at home, right? And you don't think about it while you're at work because you have to be focused on the task at hand. It's not like that's an oversimplification, but kind of the same idea.
Well, it's kind of like when people say, like, weren't you scared when you were in Afghanistan, to me? Like, well, I mean, I couldn't have done my job if I was scared. I had to compartmentalize that shit, right? And
right.
To some extent or another, yeah, you're exactly right, Jen. We all compartmentalize. We've all experienced, I shouldn't say we all, but I assume we've all experienced some level of trauma, right? And what's traumatic for one person might not be traumatic for another person, and vice versa. And yes, you're correct. DID is that pathological compartmentalizing to the extent that instead of just kind of closing it away in a dark closet in our mind, we create different personas in order to continue to attempt to exist in the world with as little impairment from the trauma as possible. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yes. And I think the problem that I have with Dr. Lewis's, her answer is not wrong, but as it applies to Letecia, this is where I disagree. Because what has happened to Letecia in this scenario, if you believe what Letecia's saying, is that she had some type of trigger which caused her to have the candle, which was the fire, triggered her to have some type of PTSD episode, which then triggered an altar to come out, and the rest was downhill from there, which would then mean that her dissociative identity disorder became so it impaired her to such an extent that people would have seen it. And she interacted with a lot of people during the time in which she would have been not only dissociated, but also in some type of psychotic situation. And I've never heard, but you're better equipped to say this than me, but I've never heard of somebody having that severe of a psychotic episode and being able to get out of it on their own without some type of trained professional intervention.
Yeah, no, I 100% would concur with that. I again, most of my experience working with people with trauma and severe trauma, war is not pretty, and I've worked with some civilians with some pretty severe civilian trauma, that after the fact, after a dissociative episode, like a flashback, because flashbacks are dissociative in nature. It's not a memory, it's not an image in your mind, it's responding as if you are reliving the event. After the dissociative flashback and PTSD, there is a lot of embarrassment on the part of the person experiencing it, because it's like, oh my God, did anybody see that? Like, where, holy shit, I can't believe that just happened. There's a lot of that effect afterwards. And so to dissociate for that long and in that way, to me, what I'm hearing, my clinical mind is hearing a lot of like sprinkles of this and sprinkles of that. And those things just don't go together. For it generally speaking, and I think Dr. B could probably say this far more eloquently, but generally speaking, there's a flavor to each diagnosis that's in our, Bible of diagnoses, the DSM. And it's not, even when there are comorbidities. So even if somebody has major depressive disorder and generalized anxiety, or even if somebody has bipolar disorder and borderline personality, you're going to see the most prominent symptoms intensify under stress, but you're also not likely to suddenly see them engaging in symptoms that are more consistent with excoriation or like skin picking or kleptomania, right? Like, I guess maybe that's a bad example to use with bipolar because impulsivity is a hallmark of that, but you're not likely to start seeing all kinds of new different symptoms all of a sudden show up. So she's picking a little bit of everything. It's like she went through the DSM and was like, give me a little of this, give me a little of that. And they don't go together, which is why I think all of us listening, myself included, even though I am a clinician, are saying like, wait, what? No, this doesn't make sense. Because if she genuinely was mentally ill in the way that she wants us to believe she is, it wouldn't necessarily make sense to us, but it would make sense that these things go together in the way that they don't make sense. To me,
Right.
all the things Letecia's saying don't make sense in a way that's not mentally ill. It to me seems like, my impression is that it's based on a very bad understanding of what mental illness is and what different symptoms of disorders are.
Right. Okay. So would you say a personality disorder is a mental illness?
So I again, going back to like, I hate that idea of pathologizing. I think we do a lot of inadvertent stigmatizing when we call things mental illness.
Right.
But generally speaking, so like I know I told you earlier about how we had to do mental health evaluations on soldiers before they were able to be kicked out of the Army. Personality disorders were not considered something that they could get medically retired for in lieu of getting fired from the military. So like, I'm a little bit biased there, because when we found personality disorder, like genuine personality disorders, that wasn't something that I mean, the military would offer them treatment, but they're not going to give them a disability rating for it. And I haven't checked the Social Security disability website in a minute, but I'm inclined to say that, actually, I don't even want to speculate, but I would have to check. I have a hunch that maybe it's not rated by Social Security disability, because personality disorders by definition is kind of a pattern of relating in the world. It's characteristic. It shows up to some extent or another in most relationships, whether you're at work, whether you're at home. It's not fun for the person who's diagnosed with it. It causes impairment, but is it mental illness? I have a hard time saying yes to that.
Wow. Okay. That is
But I can't speak for my entire field.
Right.
There's volition involved in continuing to behave in ways that are maladaptive, in my opinion.
Okay. That is so interesting though. Okay. And then the last thing I wanted to ask you guys, or that I have like off the top of my head or in my notes, and, that I was thinking about. So at the end, he asked, when did the DID start? And she says, I don't know with her, but it does tend to be early. And he said it started when she said it started after June 5th, whenever, I think he said something with the court, but after June 5th.
After competency.
Yeah.
That's when she first had, yeah.
And then the last thing he asked, was Jackass James one of her personas? Now, she said that typically their abuser will become one of their personas. And, I'm definitely not an expert. I've literally taken Psych 101 in college. That's it. Okay. But I have watched about DID and stuff. And I'd never heard of, like, the people I watched, they didn't have an alter that was like named after their abuser. Like, had you heard of that before? Had anybody heard of that? Is that a thing? And
yes, I've heard, not named, but more has
their personality.
Their personality of the person who abused them.
That would make sense. But like the naming it, having one named Jackass James, that kind of thing.
No, I think what he was asking is, did she have a personality? Did she develop, or did you see of a personality that had personality traits that were like her abuser?
Right. Well, I bet other people are confused too. And even maybe the way he said it, I wrote it down. But was Jackass James one of her personas? And he's like, you said that the abuser will oftentimes manifest into one of these personalities. And yeah, so that is confusing, but it makes much more sense that she would develop a personality with those kind of
traits.
Yes.
Yeah. It's weird what our brains will do to try to keep us functioning, as it were.
The brain is an incredible organ.
And a scary one too. We have no idea all the things that it can do.
Yeah.
That's what's scary to me.
it seeks to protect us, right? Freud was really on to something when he talked about defense mechanisms and like the
Oh,
id,
we do
ego,
love some Freud. I'm not going to lie.
he, our brain, it aims the same way we give earmuffs to kids, right? We don't want you to hear
Right.
this, we don't want you to see this. That's what our brain does to us. This is too much for you, right? That's why
Mhm.
post-traumatic stress is such a normal reaction to war. Is like, we're not designed to live in those environments or do those things or see those things on a daily basis. Like, that's not normal life. Of course, we're going to have scars from that.
And what was your comment in the chat about them asking all the witnesses if they if she
So we
had
get to recall all of the prosecution's witness to now ask them, okay, so you didn't hear Maria Sanchez didn't speak with a Spanish accent. Did you ever hear her talk in a Russian accent?
Well, the thing is that, I mean, she's such a, oh, Letecia. The thing about Maria Sanchez is this. So after the can of Monster to the face, the excuse from Letecia was that the lady had the detective had been threatening her the whole time. Okay. Then when she got to the jail, she said it was a lack of sleep and she thought she was having a nightmare and in some type of sleepwalking episode. It wasn't until far, far later, like exactly like the prosecutor said, after competency became a question, that then it was fucking Maria doing the damn most all the time.
Ray Dean wanted to join. She wanted to share her experience, or I think. Well,
Okay.
share what you want to share, Ray Dean.
Okay, so, but I didn't want my face to be shown. I thought I was going to get a picture like you guys.
You have to turn your camera off, babe.
Oh, wait. Okay. Okay.
There you go.
Now I can.
You got it now?
Yeah, you can hear me and everything?
Yes.
Okay. So I've been watching this and I'm really struggling with this because I've had several episodes of, I have not been diagnosed with DID, but I've been diagnosed with a lot of different things. Okay. And I had some episodes of dissociative disorder, and it was from a trauma in my childhood. And just a background about it, I had a boss that came in that reminded me of somebody from my childhood, and I had this career for 32 years. And I dissociated so bad to the degree that this man put me back into and maybe 22 Tantrum can add to this. It brought me back to the point of my childhood. And it brought me to the point that I could not function anymore. So I'm really having a hard time because I definitely don't think that Letecia could have killed somebody, because I can't see where that would cause that, but I could see where the flashback could bring you back to a point. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
I am.
Yeah, that's kind of the definition of the flashback, is that dissociating to the part where you're reliving a previous experience or a very similar experience, or you're having that kind of derealization, like this isn't really happening experience. And that's the defense mechanism, right?
Right.
Not always adaptive.
Right.
But
And the overwhelming stress that it brought upon me put me to the point that I physically could not function. And
it's very distressing.
In addition to that, at the same time, I had been through 4 bank robberies over the course of my career. And we had a situation where a guy came in, and that also brought me back to previous flashbacks. So I guess my question is, they are considered. I just had the neuropsych evaluation twice. I had it 2 years ago, and I had it again about 2 weeks ago. And I found it interesting that the progression of just the stress and from being like confined to my room and stuff like that. So I'm having a real struggle because like I almost want to believe Letecia's situation because I experienced something like that, but I can't see where she could murder somebody through that.
Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Just because it's a common psychological experience, and especially if you've experienced it yourself, there's that empathy there, right? You know what it's like.
Absolutely.
But you also know that the I don't want to say normal, the typical response to a dissociative episode like that is more that freaking out, that helpless, like, what do I do? This is abnormal. Not, let me go murder someone.
Right.
And we
Right.
all know from what we've heard about Gannon, it's not like he would have posed a threat to Letecia.
Right. Yes.
Right. And
Crazy.
I just wanted to share because, like I said, I've experienced something like that, and I just can't see where it could bring her to that point. And I mean, it debilitated me, to the point that, you know, I
Did you
lost my whole life.
could you
I'm
remember?
sorry that happened to you.
What's that?
I am so sorry it happened to you too. And did you remember, like, did you have memory of it when you disassociate like that? Or
The person just reminded me the way that the person was and the way the person treated me. It was a boss of mine, and he reminded me of somebody from my past that treated me like that when I was a child. And it just brought me back to my child. I was like a child and I couldn't function. And I mean, I was an executive, you know, and it was crazy. But the point is that from what I understand about DID, and correct me if I'm wrong, though, it's an umbrella, though, correct? And it's certain multiple different diagnoses with underneath it is what I thought. Okay.
So no, it the chapter of the DSM, I don't want to sound like one of her lawyers, but I'm going to, is called dissociative disorders. So there's multiple different types of dissociative disorders that DID is one of those.
Right.
Yeah, but there's not different subcategories per se of DID itself. It's just that DID is one of many dissociative disorders.
Okay, so like bipolar, schizophrenic, like that whole list of all them, they don't fall under DID?
No. Bipolar disorder, I think it's currently categorized as an episodic mood disorder. Schizophrenia is in the schizophrenia spectrum and other psychotic disorders chapters. I mean, that's just kind of how we categorize it.
what are some what are some other disorders that are there any you can think of that you do dissociate with?
Yeah, dissociative disorder, or dissociation disorder, I think is what it's called. Hold on, I've got that part of my DSM open. So DID, I mean, and everything also, there's always a catch-all too, is like unspecified dissociative disorder. There's dissociative amnesia. I think depersonalization.
Yes, that's actually what they diagnosed me with. Dissociative amnesia.
Yeah, and then there's other specified dissociative disorder and unspecified dissociative disorder. And these are all diagnoses that myself as a clinician, I would never make these diagnoses unless I had adequate information, collateral information, testing, all of those kinds of things, because these are the kinds of things that when you diagnose someone with them, it has a real impact.
Yeah, and what's interesting is I did go through the neuropsych evaluation, which I guess Letecia didn't get, but there was definitely progression in the when I originally took it to when I just took it recently. And it turned into be neurodegenerative disorder.
Neurodegenerative, really?
Yeah. So it affected it actually, I'm sorry.
I think there's multiple different diagnoses under neurodegenerative.
Yeah, it was
neurocognitive disorders.
It was in regards to my memory.
Okay.
And it was in regards to executive functioning. So anyway, getting to my point is like, I'm having a hard time because not that I sympathize with this crazy freaking lady, because she's definitely off the wall, but just knowing that I felt that and it happened, I can really, I can feel like a little bit of, if that did really happen to her, I don't know, so I struggle with that.
Oh,
yeah, it's valid.
I appreciate you sharing that with us. And like, I don't know. I think that there's probably I think there's a lot of people with different opinions on her, and I think there's probably some people who sympathize with her and have I even struggle with when we hear certain things that, she used to have Harley call her by different names. She went names or moments. And I've said this before where I'm like, okay, they're like, we're hearing about this using different names and all that more than I've ever heard in any other trial. This is not like normal to hear. So there is odd stuff. And I could definitely see, after having been through something like that, you know, how it would be hard to watch all of this. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm
Thank
really
you
sorry.
so much.
Yeah, I'm making progress, so I'm kind of happy, and I'm able to go out of my house a little bit. But I also have a lot of which I noticed the doctor said on the stand today about the central nervous system disorder. I don't know if anybody picked that up.
I heard her.
Okay.
She did.
So I'm also diagnosed with that as well. So, but again, Letecia didn't have all these tests. So, I mean, who knows? I don't know. It's just, I don't know.
I think we can all agree that something is definitely up with Letecia.
Yes.
And I think what we're all trying to do really is figure out how this even happened. And I think that this is where it's, I agree that what you described as happening can happen. It does happen. It is a real thing. But what I think is missing from Letecia's story is the truth about, if that happened, what the real trigger was, because it wasn't the candle, because the candle came after everything else. So her story has been that to Dr. Lewis, and this is what Dr. Lewis testified to, that Gannon knocked over the candle, which then was reminiscent and reminded her of an event that happened when she was a kid, of a more serious fire, right? Which then triggered some type of PTSD episode, which then caused her to sort of relive a time when her stepfather was still alive, and it escalated from there. She mistook Gannon for her stepfather, and on, just all the things, right?
Yeah.
But the problem with that is that the candle situation didn't happen like that.
Wait, why?
So that can't have been the trigger.
So
Why haven't they pointed it out? Because his blood was under the wax. They know she did move the carpet twice. They know the candle incident had to happen after blood. So why would they not point out, hey, how did the candle accident trigger you whenever he was bleeding before the candle was spilt?
And that's what I've been struggling with, Alex, because I don't get that, because I'm like, that's not the trigger, you know?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, guys. Reading, I thank you for sharing this.
I don't know why I did. It's very personal.
Of course it is.
Because
but that was so incredibly brave, and when we can't, it happens to people, right? But that doesn't mean it's happened to like me, or I can only talk about what's ever happened to me, and nothing had like this thankfully has ever happened to me. So I can't speak with experience, but it is helpful to hear somebody who isn't Letecia, who, for fuck's sake, she just lies about everything. If she told me that the sky was blue, I would have to go look, because she lies so much. Do you know what I mean? Right. So it's really hard to understand what's going on when it's so much lies. So for you to come up here and share this was incredibly brave, and I appreciate it, because it does give me a different perspective.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I went from a functioning executive to that I've been for 32 years to just one person being able to set me back, and I haven't been able to come out of it.
So let me.
You will, though.
You will. I love a good demonstrative reading, and I'm really sorry if this is inappropriate for me to say, but you guys had asked something earlier about Letecia, right? Like what you hear, and I would invite the chat if they want to go back and listen to Radine describe her experience again. The difference between what Radine is saying, and I don't have to see her face to know that she's tearing up. I can hear it in her voice.
I can hear it. Mm-hmm.
And that fear and that the all I can say is freakiness of how she described it. You could tell that it still is very upsetting and disturbing to her. It shocked her. It came out of nowhere, right? Like, and if this is Letecia's first break, you would hear at some point, cut the bullshit, you would hear in her voice, you guys, I don't know what just happened. I'm almost a doctor. I've you would hear that terror. God
Yep.
forbid it ended the way that it still ended. What you don't hear in anything Letecia says is an ounce of the sincerity that you
Wow.
hear in Radine's voice.
You're
That's-
right. There's actually the opposite. She's
Yeah.
talking about something that's highly traumatic to her, right? This is a horrible thing that's happened. And yet there is no actual emotion in her voice at all. She's
Yeah.
almost got it's not quite a flat effect, but there's something very,
Detached.
for lack of it's detached. Thank you. It's detached, as if she's not talking about something that she actually experienced.
Right.
I
And
could
if-
never convey that story that you just told the way that you told it, because it didn't happen to me.
right.
Thank you.
I would sound detached if I were to retell it. If I were to say if I were to retell the story and I would explain everything that you explained, my tone would be detached, because I am detached. It didn't happen to me. And I think that's the overall arc of the whole conundrum with Letecia. She's
And-
talking about something as that happened to her as if it didn't actually happen to her.
Right. Exactly.
And Radine, you got this. You're gonna be just fine.
Yes,
I
you
just
are.
know-
Yeah, I don't know. I
Figured-
lost everything. So, but it is
I will
what it
say
is.
this, Ray. I will say this: you can get it back, and I don't normally agree with Dr. Phil, but on this he is correct. You
Yeah.
cannot fix what you don't acknowledge, and you've
And-
acknowledged
And I
something
had,
happened, and you're working towards fixing it.
right.
Yes, it's
And
going
I
to
had
take time,
anxiety.
but you can do it.
Yeah, I had anxiety, depression for many years, and like somebody was saying earlier, like the DBT. I mean, that's a wonderful, for anybody out there that struggles with that. DBT therapy is the most amazing therapy in the world. So, anybody that's struggling with anything, I would definitely recommend DBT. And yeah, I'm probably going to regret getting up here, so I'm going to get off now. And
Oh.
thank you so
Thank
much. I
you,
just wanted to,
Radine.
like, I was
Thank you so much.
cringing, like listening to everything, and I was just like, I have to say something. So
Hey,
thank
you feel
you
better.
so much.
Yeah, and you're so welcome. And you're gonna be just fine. And anytime you ever want to add anything, you let me know. And we
Well,
appreciate.
Yes, please
try-
do. And if you come
I'll
and
try not
visit
to
me,
cry
you add
next
it
time.
too. No, you can cry if you want to. Crying is a healthy emotion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
My
Let
therapist,
it out.
my therapist would be very proud of me right now. So
Thank
I'm
thank you,
very
guys.
proud of you.
Me too.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Radine. All the
Bye.
best
Bye.
to you.
Okay, before I let you guys go, look at Kate's comment. She said, if your alter committed murder, her hiding lying would mean her alters would have to be so well connected and can communicate and be able to hide and cooperate to hide it all. Now, listen to Radine, how this just like this first experience, like if this would have just happened to Letecia, she had a break, how it has affected her. I don't believe that if this was, not her first, couldn't be your first experience if you knew how to communicate and hide. If all your alters knew how to communicate and you had figured out how to work the whole system. If it was your first, if it was your first experience. So my point is that, you would. It's either her first experience, or if it's not, her family and stuff would have, some kind of clue about it. So, yeah, I think that her coming up here and really showed, like, that was an excellent point to make, to like,
She shone a light on something that we needed to hear. Like we're miss that element of somebody's personal experience.
yeah, versus
I think
Letecia.
that's what we needed.
Yes,
Yeah. The Leticia's detached looking ass.
it's your first
I
break.
know
You
you'll
would,
love it.
you wouldn't
Arguably,
scared to death, right? You wouldn't know how to like communicate with them and things like that if it had just started. If it was your first time, right?
yeah, I agree
I
with
think
you,
the-
Alex. I also
Yeah.
added that you'd have to get them to agree not to rat one another out, right? If there's
Right.
a childlike version of the altar, they're probably a tattletale to some extent.
Yeah. Oh my.
Nothing she says, which I know it's so like it's kind of backwards thinking, makes logical sense, because first of all, murder is not a rational process, and nobody that does it is in their rational mind. Even if they're doing it truly out of self-defense, you're not rational because you're afraid. You can't be afraid and be rational. They don't go together. So it's an irrational, and we're trying to rationalize it. And yet at the same time, none of it makes a lick of sense at all. Like it shouldn't make sense, but hers makes less sense. You know what I'm saying? Like you can make sense sometimes of somebody's when they have a psychotic break, right? You can sort of you can follow the trail, as it were. But with Letecia, there's nothing there. It's like everything she does is just fucking hollow. And about the whole calling her by a different name, honestly, Allie, I think that can really be basically chalked up to Letecia doesn't like Letecia. She doesn't like who she is, who she was, and where she came from, and she's forever trying to change that. And that is evidenced by her constantly caring what people think about her, to the extent that she will change her answers and who she is, right? Or who she appears to be, I should say, to fit what she thinks people want from her, because she doesn't actually like herself.
Oh, I definitely agree with you there. And also, you know, there's other, like Dr. B was saying, there's other personality disorders that have elements of identity issues where you're not
Right.
like borderline. And even my friend Jen, she would have
not this Jen. It's not this Jen.
What I was talking about earlier that had borderline. She would sometimes, you know, be in all black and like punk rock, and then she definitely was having some identity issues. She couldn't figure out who she was and what she liked, period.
I was going to ask something, but now I forgot what I was going to ask.
And
it had to do with, like when people, like how on YouTube, it's very popular at this moment to call people narcissists. Everyone who's an asshole is a narcissist. Well, I have a newsflash for you. First of all, narcissism is not something that a ton of people have. Like not everybody on you that like the fact that they all exist on YouTube is like a statistical anomaly, but we all have features of narcissism. You have to take care of yourself before you take in. That's why they tell you on the airplane to put the mask on you before you put it on anybody else. We all have a little bit of narcissism in us. It's, you know, so
we all have a little bit of almost everything in the DSM in us, right? It's just how much of it is what ultimately is going to determine if we meet the diagnostic criteria, right? Is it
right?
We have so much that it's impairing our friendships, or we're losing our jobs, or we're failing school.
And none of that's happening to Letecia. What was really going on in her life around that time that had become unmanageable?
Well,
that you can see evidence. Well, no, what I'm saying is that you see evidence of her life being unmanageable. Like she didn't have a psychotic break and just no call, no show. What did she do? She texted her employer.
Yeah.
She made up a lie, granted, and a ridiculous lie, right? But she thought ahead. She in the moment of having a psychotic episode, right? She thinks I better fucking call into work.
Yep.
How many people do you know, have you ever heard of who've been a similar, have some type of psychotic break, and the first thought that they have at 4:30 in the morning is, shit, I better call into work. I better text my boss.
Well, you're not going to like my answer, Jen, but that
do people
I told you about that happened in Afghanistan. That person was experiencing
I like your answer, the truth. I like the truth.
So they were experiencing psychosis. I suspect that they had been experiencing psychosis for quite some time. So it wasn't like a snap your fingers break, but they were very worried. So I medevaced them out of country ASAP. They were very worried because they had a shift that night and they needed to go to their shift and they needed to get back to their unit and they had their duties to fulfill. And this was very sincere psychopathy. I mean, very sincere psychosis. There was no malingering. They weren't telling me this to convince me of anything. I think Letecia shows forethought more than psychosis.
There you go. That's a better way to put it. Because there's just some of the shit she does just makes, I don't know.
Calculated.
It's very calculated. And after those, I'm like, I sort of always thought that maybe she had a buildup of resentment over a period of time, and that she likely had maybe been, I think I've always thought that Gannon was her target for what, the one that she picked on the most in that house. But I always sort of thought that all these resentments built up over time, and then she just had, like, she snapped and went too far. And then once she crossed the line, there was no going back. But all the things that she did took place over a period of time. Like, the first event started on Sunday night, and the next events didn't start until Monday at some point in the afternoon, likely after 2 or 2:30, between 2 and 2:30, when they got home from the PetSmart or Petco or whatever it was.
Well, in DID, wouldn't your alters change based on your needs? Like, isn't that kind of how it would work?
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't an alter step up and be the rational one, the calm one? Like, know how to, you know what I'm saying? Like, you can hear it in the calls between her and Al, that she is, I don't know the right word to use because I'm not in that field, but she sounds out of fucking control.
Yeah, like
that's what she sounds. Yes, frantic.
Mm-hmm.
So in that time of a heavy, stressful, wouldn't she have developed an alter that would be capable of handling that level of stress, who would step up and run the show?
Yep.
Not be giving cockamamie crazy ass answers to the cops. And, it's, to me, there's clearly something wrong with her, right? Obviously, I think that's apparent. And I think we all agree. But at the end of the day, I do not think that it's CID. And maybe part of Dr. Lewis's empathy and sympathy towards Letecia is because she knows that something is wrong with her. And the fact of the matter is, and this is just the truth, when she goes to prison, because make no mistake, that's where she's most likely headed, there won't be any treatment for her. It will, whatever's going on with her, personality disorder or mental health, will likely get worse.
Is it true that their narcissism is like 1 in 100, but God, what is it? Sociopath I remember this from like the 101 class I took in college. It was like 1 in 10 or something like that, like much less than or am I wrong?
I don't know the statistics on that. I mean, sociopathy is also not in the DSM, but the difference between having traits of something, again, on that spectrum versus meeting the full criteria and then ending up in a place where you get diagnosed with it. Like, most narcissists don't find themselves in treatment. We'll just say that.
That makes perfect sense.
Well, because nothing's ever their fault. So why would they be in treatment? Nothing is wrong with them. It's everybody else.
Now, a narcissistic injury is, with a true narcissist, could land you in a hospital for a unsuccessful attempt at self-harm or something.
I remember about like 1 in 100. Like, that's how, but just
let me see if the DSM says.
Yeah.
They usually have prevalence rates in here.
Yeah, Tellini and Cook, they love the DSM-5. Bust that out and just pick something random and just read one random sentence and ask a question about it, because that's what they do.
I can't with those hooligans. When lay people try to use this book, I mean, it's hard enough for us to digest everything in here, but then quote a stat. Like, we have an abbreviated version with just the criteria for a reason. Okay.
I was to ask you that. I was about to say, what is that DSM-5 like? I saw it on Amazon. I was looking at the different versions of the DSM-5, and it was just like a pamphlet almost with like all the different, gosh, hold on, let me go look and see what it was.
So the prevalence rate of narcissistic personality disorder, at least based on the DSM-4 definitions, ranges from 0% to 6.2%. So
of the whole population of the world.
Thus far, that's what studies have found. And again, the applicability of a study is going to depend on how large and how diverse the sample size was. So, and that the DSM-4.
Well, clearly they didn't take a sampling from YouTube, because if they had, the numbers would be far higher, because everybody on YouTube is a narcissist. Just ask people. They'll tell you, oh yeah, so-and-so's a narcissist.
DSM-5 overview, quick study academic. pamphlet. I was looking at it on Amazon because I was like, man, I should get that because that it has like just the
I just want to do it. You're like Hermione Granger over here, just checking out extra books for a bit of light reading.
The American Psychiatric Association, they're the one that published the DSM. You could get a lot of good information off their website for free. If anybody's really interested in diagnostic criteria, I want to say that Wikipedia is also a pretty good source of free information on diagnoses, because that's essentially like, it's not peer reviewed, but like any mental health person that sees something incorrect on there could go in and flag it for the Wikipedia.
right.
And you know what else I wonder about? How are they trying to so quickly diagnose Letecia as DID? I mean, I understand that it's important because of this trial, but typically doesn't something like this take a considerable amount of time? Like, you would have to really be comfortable with the person that you're talking to. You're there, you know, this just seems awfully, she just seems so very open about everything with Dr. Torres. Like, she talked about stuff that, I mean, I don't know, because I've only ever seen it like on TV when they've like the A&E had that special something about it. Her name was Jane's, but I can't remember what the name of the show was. And she was working with her therapist and psychiatrist together for decades. It took her a long time to even be diagnosed with it. And then apparently what her goal was to integrate. That's what she was trying to do, is to integrate all of her different alters. But, you know, it took a long time for her to even feel like even once she'd been diagnosed, it took them a long time to get to know all of the alters. Do you know what I mean? For them to see all of them.
Yeah.
So for Letecia to just be out here rattling off all of her, you know, Taylor and Tyler, and they're married and they've got kids, they've got 3 of them. And then, you know, there's Maria, and she makes $1,500 a minute, and it just doesn't, I don't know.
She doesn't even need to have DID to be insane at the time either. She could have, I mean, I don't know. Well, I know that they say that you need a diagnosis is part of the insanity evaluation, but sometimes you can't come to one, like they couldn't come to one with her because she didn't meet all of the criteria. You know, she met specific part of certain things, but not in full. So I don't know.
But but they never could find. This is the element that was missing. This is why she was found sane. Because whatever mental health issue she may have been, she as of yet undiagnosed, right, wasn't so unmanageable and didn't rise to the level of the legal definition. She didn't have those features as part of it. Do you know what I'm saying?
I think could explain it. If you want a concise definition, Jen,
please do.
Explanation,
because I'm tired.
Yeah, the features of borderline, right? We know from listening to interviews that Letecia made it all about her. She didn't say, how's the search going? Has they found it? Right? It was all about, are we getting back together? Right? That fear of abandonment. So her and Al and the family are living together for the first time, and one big happy family. They celebrate their anniversary, and then wham, Al has to go to captain's career course. And I believe during Al's testimony, he said that his captain's career course was supposed to be 6 months in person TDY, which means he's in Oklahoma for 6 months doing classes. Now, I could have that wrong, because I think for my field, our captain's career course was a bit shorter than that. But there are some advanced Army trainings that are required that are several months away from home. Your family doesn't get to come with you. So if Letecia has borderline traits, let's just call them that, and one of her things is not having attention, not having her spouse nearby after they've done all of this back and forth in Alaska, and she finally gets them, out of Alaska for the alleged reports of SA, right? Well, now Al's leaving, and the thought of being away from him for 6 months and caring for his kids by herself. I mean, they said something she said something, I think, in one of her interviews about that the candle thing was something to get Al to come home.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, she did.
And she did say that been an escalation of that in order to get Al to come home, because the thought of being away from him, I mean, Oklahoma is not a far drive. Sorry, I just drove across the country last weekend. But like, come on. But I have a feeling that has something to do with what happened, that might have been part of the trigger for her to all of a sudden,
the stressor.
oh shit, I've got this new job, I've got these 3 kids, my husband's not here, there's nothing for me to get my fill, right? Because borderlines get recharged about that affirmation and that reassurance, and I'm the center of your world, right? And Al can't give her unconditional or immediate responses because he's in classes, and in Army classes, even when you're an officer, you're still going to get in trouble if you've got your phone out in the middle of class responding to your crazy but not insane wife. So
right. And she did get mad the night. Well, I guess it really wasn't the night. It would really have been the very early morning hours of the 27th, which would have been Monday, because she did text him like at 2:30 in the morning to tell him about the candle incident and the tummy troubles. And she was pissed because he wasn't answering. And you made me think of something else. There was several instances prior to this horrible event where Letecia was telling Al all the time that somebody was breaking into their house. And she was convinced that somebody was breaking into their house. And I always thought it was an attention-seeking mechanism to get him to come home.
Just paranoid. But maybe it was to get him to come home because, she definitely told the officer that they all wanted him to come home. She made it sound a little worse than it was so he would come home. And that her and the kids, they all had talked about it and wanted him to come home.
Which is exactly what she needed to hear. Okay, so what you're saying is, I hear the kids who, if you ask children Gannon and Lena's age, do you miss your dad? Do you miss your mom? Do you want them to come home? They will most inevitably say yes. So all Letecia heard is, cool, enact operation, pretend we've been burglarized, and then she just continued to escalate it.
What was what the Google searches were missing? Because then I'm going to let you guys go because I know you're tired. I'm getting tired, and tomorrow is a big day, you guys.
I'm craving tortellini. Thanks, Jen.
Sorry. I can't get that. I think Allie made like a frozen caramel something. And I've been thinking about that since she put it in the chat. I don't know what it is. Clearly.
Concentrates, vanilla ice cream, ice, caramel syrup, whipped cream, and a little bit of you have to a little bit of spring water. You have to have the coffee concentrate is supposed to be 50-50 with your water to make a cup of coffee. So I added half. Like I did 2/3 cup of the coffee concentrate, 1/3 of a cup of water. So
what I'm hearing essentially is where you are is not really that far of a drive from me. So you should get in your car now, come over, and we will make those and watch the trial. That's what I'm hearing.
That would be so. I wish.
You're making me hungry. So the Google search thing, the pop quiz I was giving the chat. So what do we all do? Like if you've got a bump on your shoulder or a knot in your neck, like what's the first thing we all do? Like, what does this mean? Right.
I do use Google, but not for stuff like that. Not like that. I'm not going to lie.
You don't, there are a lot of people that Google their symptoms.
I don't usually have a whole lot of symptoms. I will tell you right now, I've never cleared my Google history. Okay. And I've had this phone since 2021. So it's now 2023. It's like 2 years worth. Can you imagine? And it's all, I promise you, related either to music, movies, or true crime.
I Google symptoms. I Google them for me. I Google them for the kids. Like, even if it's just little things, like I have varicose vein, like starting in my leg. And I'm like, Googling about that.
What to do for burns? My son burned the carpet, not my son burned his arms. What's a home remedy for burns, right? Like I'm, heart palpitations, right? Like 90, based on Letecia's Google searches. And if I'm like just using those as like a form of information of all the different things that she did Google. And granted, we don't know if the prosecution just didn't pay enough attention to include things about symptoms. But one would think if she had experienced severe mental health related symptoms, whether or not they're DID related or borderline related or whatever, we would expect to some extent that she would be doing some Googling, maybe even up to and including, what do I need to get a psychologist's note before she saw Dr. Niederheiser? Or what kind of doctor do I need to see to get this kind of note? Or what does, this thing mean? How to fake DID or, anything. And granted, prosecution very well could have just left them off their poster board. But I think it's pretty notable that at no point in there did we see anything about mental health, legal insanity, or simple like anxiety or dissociation symptoms, post-traumatic stress symptoms. We didn't see any of that.
That
And
is
but I will say this, that is an excellent point. If she had Googled those, then you can expect the defense to bring it up.
I was about to say that. Yes, they would have it. Even if it wasn't on the poster board, because they have to have everything. They're not
correct. So the defense will have it.
But if Dr. Lewis is the last witness,
well, Letecia might be the last witness, depending
may or
on
may
how
not
doctor.
be.
Right.
But
That's why I said maybe
get it admitted as evidence.
So how much are y'all thinking that, like, if you could rate it on a percentage, how much percentage chance she's going to testify?
Did I tell you me and Agent Retired Grusing talked about that in court today?
No.
No. Why didn't you should have led with that shit?
I thought I mentioned it during Crime Curious's stream. Yeah, no. We both
hello. I know I would remember that shit. Even if I couldn't remember my own name, I would be able to remember that. Okay, so tell me.
We were both just kind of like based like same 50-50. I kind of think that she's going to feel like she has to, but then I kind of feel like she won't. Like I could be 100% she is, and the next second, once I think about it, I'm like 100% she's not. But I have no idea. He has no idea. The way I'm inclined to think, here's what I'm thinking, or my thought process on it. The way she went on and on and on with Agent Grusing for 4 hours. The way she went on and on and on with the former detective female Bickle, was it?
Yes, Bethel.
Yeah. For 4+ hours, right? Didn't have an attorney there for any of those. Didn't ask. I mean, she kind of sort of hinted at it the night before on the phone with former Detective Bethel, which was notable to me. But she loves to hear herself talk. So there's the part of me that's like, dude, she thinks she can talk herself out of anything. She thinks she can talk herself out of being a suspect in the room with Detective Bethel, with Agent Grusing. Even after he told her she was under arrest, she thought she could talk her way out of that. Now that she's in court, maybe some things have changed and maybe she's not feeling that sure. Or maybe she's sizing up the jury and saying, I can convince these people, or I only have to convince one, right? Letecia thinks she knows better than other people. So there's a huge part of me that thinks she's going to say, like, you know what? No, I'm going up there. I'll put
That's what I think it is. That's exactly my thought process. That Letecia's at this point, like, YOLO, I'm up there.
YOLO.
And her lawyers might just be like, you know what? Dr. Lewis was a flop. We only took 3 hours with our star witness, our one of 2 star witnesses. And, prosecution took 3 times that long with their wrap-up guy. Like, I don't know.
And they're still going with their star witness. The prosecution is still going with the defense's star witness. Let that sink in. They have already questioned Dorothy, my friend Dorothy, longer than and more in depth than the defense did. And this is my problem with the defense. There would have been a way for them. There is a way for them to have questioned Dr. Lewis that would have been much more concise, much more succinct, and would have come across much better to the jury. And what I will say that I have noticed that is a deficit from both, not Tortellini. What's his name again, Allie?
Tellini,
Tortellini, and Cook, is that they don't ask good questions.
Right.
They don't. They have like a pattern. They have written these questions down and they cannot adjust they can't deviate from those questions. They are not good
For
on
me,
the
with,
fly.
for me with them, half the time I look at them and I'm like, my God, you guys, at least a little bit of effort. I mean, come on. And then half the time I look at them, I'm like, damn, where did that come from? Because they come out of nowhere with some like really feisty, like that. They're really hard on that one witness. You remember? And it was,
Yes.
yeah. So I don't know, man. I wonder.
Dr. Moore.
I just have
And
to.
I know somebody who works at the jail doing mental health currently. Might be able to convince them to maybe say some things. Yeah, you could tell as soon as those mental health witnesses got on there, they were going hard, trying to poke holes.
Right, which I had told everybody that's what they would do because this is their defense, is not guilty by reason of insanity. So they're not. And I remember asking Crime Curious on her very first live that she had with the attorney Chris, if he were in this position, would he poke holes in any of the forensics or any like the digital evidence or any of that stuff? And he said he would probably do it a little bit, but he would mainly focus on the mental health experts. See, I be listening.
It's very interesting, but I don't know. All I know is this: at the end of the day, when it comes to her testifying, it's on her. They can't stop her, and
nope.
I think that, we know that she has the attitude that she knows all and that she definitely is manipulative and she is somewhat convincing at times, but she can concoct quite a story. So I will not be surprised if her ass is up on the stand. I really won't. I'm hoping that she does, just because I want to hear from her. Even though I know none of it will be true, I still would like to hear from her. The same thing with like Lori. I know Lori won't testify, but God, I would love to hear her ask some questions, man.
This is what I don't understand about old Lori Vallow. She keeps saying that it's all going to make sense. It's all going to make sense. Bitch, when are you going to explain why you did what you did? Because now, which that's another thing, Allie, you and I have got to make time, just me and you, to talk about what we're going to do with Vallow, because some big ass shit came out yesterday. That hair being found was huge, because I went back after we got off the live yesterday and listened to that and listened to the DNA expert testify at exactly where it was. And she's from Bodie Labs. So that confirmed that it is the hair that was in question back at pretrial, right? Where it was found and who all they used to compare it to. Melanie Gibb.
I know. Uh-huh. I cannot believe that. That shows that they have been they're looking at her.
I'm trying to tell you.
In 2022, after, because remember, we looked at the date when she did that test.
Yes.
Testified after that, they still compared her DNA. That is.
And they're still comparing her in 2023.
Oh, my God.
So if I were you, Melanie, I wouldn't get too comfortable. I wouldn't be breathing a sigh of relief, ma'am.
I hope oh my God, I would love to see her ass pay for what she's done, because she was just as big of a part of it and definitely helped Lori get as far as she did.
So she delayed them finding JJ and Tylee by simply first the lie, and then first it was not answering, and then the lie. That was a delay. She delayed, I don't know. Would it have prevented something? We'll never know because of, Melanie.
So 22 tantrums, are you going tomorrow?
No, tomorrow I've got a full day of patients of my own.
No, you don't. Just call out.
No. I had to move them all from today. Remember, I was supposed to have jury duty today, and then
that's right.
My number report.
Oh boy.
So I got a full day tomorrow, and then Thursday I only have one, but Friday is my next full day off. So
Friday. Well, that's perfect because they're not in court on Thursday.
Yeah. So I want to say I'd love to go on Friday. I am not a morning person, y'all. So being there at 9 a.m. would not be a fun thing.
Well, you don't have to. It's not like you have to interact with anybody. You
No, I
just sit
know,
in the
but
corner quietly.
the court
sitting
order
there.
is like you have to basically come in at the beginning, or if you leave, you can't come back to a break. And that
Oh.
wasn't being followed today. People were going in and out, but like I respect the court. I don't want to get my ass in trouble. Like that bailiff already knows my face. Who's to
Well,
say she's
that's
not listening
true.
right now? Be like, aha, I'm going to get you the next time you're here. Like,
That's
you're in
true.
big
That
trouble.
people didn't in they were gone for long periods of time, so that kind of makes sense. So then on a break they might let them come back in, or what?
Yeah, they weren't actually guarding the door like that today. I suspect if like the closer it gets to closing arguments / verdict watch, I think that they're going to be a lot more stringent. I think they actually talked about that after the jury left one of the nights more recently. Like they're going to limit who can be in the gallery to Gannon's family, Letecia's family, and then like family members of the lawyers,
Right.
both sides lawyers. But I think the DA said like we are not actually expecting it to get that crowded. I don't know. I have respect for decorum, and I certainly would never want to do anything to like single myself out or draw any any attention to myself, i.e. anonymity. But
No, I'm glad that you didn't, because I'm glad that you don't do that kind of stuff, and I'm glad that you respect the process, because
Yeah, too.
a lot of
And
people don't.
I still can't believe can't because that believes that he was bullying her, because I'm really shocked about that, because I'm curious. I don't know. I'm curious how the jury feels, because I saw that on Twitter, didn't see a lot of it in here. And then she was the first person I saw in here, but that shows me that the opinions are not all the same. And that is what's so interesting to me. And I'm really
I
curious.
think even if, oh, sorry, Allie.
That's all. I'm just curious how the jury feels. And will you tell us before you go, like your kind of impression of them and how they felt after Jen says whatever about that?
I'll say the only thing I'll say about the jury is this: do I think that there will be some people on the jury who feel bad for the way that the prosecutor spoke to Dr. Lewis? Yes, but I do not think that it's going to change their minds or make a difference in the way that they view her actual testimony, the substance of what she was saying. They probably do feel some type of way. There's probably more than one of them that feels some type of way and felt like he was disrespectful. But I think that they will feel that way, and they'll be like, have a moment, right? But then they will go back and deliberate about the substance of her testimony. And I think it's going to be, I also believe there's at least going to be one or two juries or jury members who says the same thing that we've said, which is, how come she has not gotten up there and stated outright that she believes that Letecia Stauch was legally insane at the time of those murders? She stopped short of saying that.
I hope you're right. I really, really do. I hope you're right. And I think that it makes sense. I mean, that because if you take all that away down to the substance of her testimony, you know what I mean? And what exactly she brought to the table. So what do you think about the jurors? Like, what was your impression of, I know you said on Crime Curious, but just in case people weren't there and to get a refresher on that.
So I'm going to just say this out loud because I was typing up a response to somebody. Colorado is a death penalty state. I don't believe we have officially removed it from our state constitution or wherever, forgive my ignorance. They have that. Colorado stopped executing people. And I think the governor may have even commuted all death sentences to life without parole within the last, I want to say 5 years. Chris will know more. I am not a lawyer. I'm not a legal expert. But yes, Colorado is a death penalty state. We no longer execute people. Right. And I suspect that we'll be abolishing the death penalty here within the next few years, if we haven't already.
They did abolish it, but technically she still falls under the date to where she could get it. But they're not going after it. So, and they must not go after it at all anymore then, huh?
No, they don't. Then, like, culturally, many of you, unfortunately, are probably familiar with Colorado Springs because, as I mentioned earlier, the Planned Parenthood shooter, last name Deer, was in 2015. We just had the Club Q shooting last November. It's a very conservative area, although it's slightly more becoming a little, I wouldn't say liberal, less conservative maybe, but there's some super conservative religious organizations here. There's tons of military here, which may or may not influence the culture. And just to give you an idea of what kind of background the jury might be coming from. And then with that said, the jury, I guess, behaved the way I would expect a jury or hope a jury would behave. They seemed in large amount tuned in. They seemed like they were paying attention. Everybody was facing, their bodies were facing the person that was speaking. You know, when the witness spoke, they would look at the witness. For the most part, when the lawyers would ask a question, they would look at the lawyers. There were a few people taking notes, a couple chairs that were twisting side to side. I didn't see a lot of the kind of typical indicators of like boredom or just kind of disengaging or shutting somebody out. I don't think I saw any blatant like shaking of the head or anything like that. I do think I saw one of the jurors straight up roll their eyes. We don't have the dialogue from Jen's chat yet, but I commented as soon as I saw it that I'm pretty sure I just saw somebody roll their eyes.
We won't have it. I took it out, remember? So everybody can vent.
And I want to say it was in response to something kind of like really outlandish that Dr. Lewis said, like maybe one of her explanations after the prosecution asked her a question that clearly like kind of proved that she was contradicting herself to some extent.
I feel like it was during the Billy Maria saga. If I'm remembering correctly, just from chat, but there won't be a live chat replay because I took it out.
Yeah,
so everybody could say what they wanted.
One of those times where the prosecution had kind of backed her into her corner, where her only choice was going to be to come up with something more outlandish or to contradict herself. They did seem to really perk up when like the prosecution went in there and just kind of like, I remember just sending like fire icons that everything was on fire at that point. It was like rapid fire questions, very direct questions, kind of like, let's stop beating around the freaking bush here. And the jury seemed to respond to that, and not so much in a like, oh my gosh, you're beating this lady up, but like you are asking really good questions, and they seem to be kind of questions that the jury would want to know answers to. But in terms of like straight up reads on whether it looked like they had any sort of minds made up, they're again doing what a jury you would expect and want a jury to do. They don't seem to be transparent at all with whatever it is they're thinking. Granted, I was only there watching them for like 4 hours and only seeing their profiles, but for the most part, they seem to be engaged and paying a lot of close attention.
That is really, I don't know. I don't know. I'd love to be able to get inside their minds, but
we will tomorrow a little bit because they'll ask questions. And I kind of think that might be one of the like pros in Letecia's mind for testifying is that the jury, I have the hiccups. The jury will get to ask her questions. And I think she thinks that she can actually convince one or two of them.
What'd you stab him with? What was the candle about? Yeah.
They can't just ask whatever.
Yada, yada, yada.
Whatever.
I really think that. Sorry. Go ahead, Alex.
I'm sorry, too. Here, it just take me 1 sec. The death penalty in Colorado. On February 26th, the legislature of 2020, the legislature voted to pass a bill that repealed capital punishment for any offenses charged on or after July 1st of 2020, and the governor signed the bill into law on March 23rd of 2020. So it was, abolished in March of 2020, but technically any offense up until July 1st, which, like I said, this would, right before that. So, okay, yep. Sorry.
I knew it was recent. I couldn't really remember exactly how recent, but there was a lot going on in 2020, right? Mm-hmm. Sure. I think that when it comes to mental health, like if the jury starts to think, well, she clearly like we've been talking about, like she's clearly crazy. Like, does that mean she's insane, right? Unless there's a really good jury instruction on what the definition of legal insanity is, what the threshold is that the jury has to believe Letecia meets. I worry that it could be hung because there might be one person that can't be convinced or is not convinced that insanity is the only way to explain this crime. I hope I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong. If she gets off NGRI, I'm going to be devastated and severely disappointed with my neighbors here. But
I don't think it will happen. And here's why, because that was their main problem during jury selection. There multiple, when they were bringing them in the large groups, I watched listened, obviously, because there was no video. But anyway, their main bone of contention was the insanity defense. And I know that when the trial actually started, when they got the jury seated, the first thing that the defense did was move to have a bench trial because they weren't happy with the jury that they got.
They did that during jury selection? They moved for bench trial?
No, after jury selection.
After
that was the first. Wow. That was the first thing that they did because they had struck everybody that they were allowed to strike. They'd used all their strikes up, and they did not like the jury that got seated. There were probably a few in there that they wanted to strike and couldn't, and so they asked for a bench trial, and the judge said, "Oh, hell no!" I mean, in his nice way, right? Yeah. And then when they got up to do their opening statements, they are already.
Oh no.
Did she get muted? Her thing fell out because I'm not on the screen where I can see y'all for a second. I was typing in the chat.
I don't hear her. Jen, are you still there?
It'll take like 2 seconds and she'll be right back. Wait, yeah. Her mic comes out on accident. You there, Jen?
Yeah. Can you not hear me?
Now we
can.
can.
Dropped out.
Oh, that's weird. Okay. Oh, because my internet dropped for a second. So, okay. Anyway, after they got the jury, they moved for a bench trial, and then when they did the opening statements, they sounded defeated, and they spoke to the jurors directly, about just listen and give them a fair chance. But I really don't see anything at this point that's going to move that needle. I really don't. They all had a problem with it.
Actually, what I read was not from Amber. That was what I looked up, but she sent me something else that said that they did commute. That's what I was trying to put in chat. But when I came to see if her mic was unmuted, it deleted my whole comment. So
I'm sorry.
It's not your fault, but it said that they did commute the death penalty. The people that were on death row, their sentences. Is what she sent me, and then about the same date as well. But yeah, all right, you guys, it is late. We've been on here forever.
Yes,
but it went fast, and it was so interesting. I'm so glad both of you guys came up. I wish Crime Curious's thing, internet and stuff was working well, but I always love listening to you, Jen, and your insight, and I loved hearing from your opinion, your opinion, because you're educated in the same thing as the person who's a little different, but still the same field.
I'm not a drug dealer. I don't have that prescription pad. No, I appreciate that.
But
Thank you for having me.
Yes, it was awesome. I would love for you to come up anytime you want to give your insight on these kind of or anything, but you know what I mean. Let us know. I'll definitely bring you back.
You know how to reach me now, Miss Alex.
I know. Yeah, I will. I emailed you the link. So yeah. All right, you guys. Thank you for coming and chat. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. It was a long live, and I really, really appreciate it. Said it was so interesting. It was so interesting. Thank you guys. All right, I'm gonna let you guys go. Have a good night, and I'll see you tomorrow. It's gonna be a big day. Jen, are you streaming the? You
yes,
are, right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So I'll see you guys over at JennLu's at 11 Eastern, 9. What is it? Mountain.
Mm-hmm.
Mountain. All right. Bye, you guys.
Bye.
Good night.